Elena Hart stood frozen in Damien Vale's penthouse, her hands trembling as she held the ultrasound image, proof of the life growing inside her. The man she loved, the most dangerous crime boss in the city, stared at her with cold fury before ripping the picture in half. "You're lying," he snarled. "I can't have children. This bastard isn't mine." 3 months later, Elena has vanished from his world, rebuilding her shattered heart while carrying his daughter alone. But when Damien discovers the devastating truth about his past, he'll stop at nothing to reclaim what he destroyed. If you're ready for a story of second chances, betrayal, and redemption, stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels. The rain hammered against the windows of St. Catherine's Hospital with relentless fury, as if the sky itself knew that Elena Hart's world was about to shatter into irreparable pieces. She sat in her car in the underground parking garage, the engine idling, her hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles had gone white. On the passenger seat beside her lay a manila envelope containing an ultrasound image, the first photograph of the tiny life growing inside her. 8 weeks. That's how far along she was. 8 weeks of secret hope, of whispered prayers in the dark, of imagining a future that suddenly felt possible. 8 weeks since the night Damien Vale had looked at her differently, had touched her as though she were something precious rather than convenient, had made love to her with a tenderness that contradicted everything his reputation promised. Elena reached for the envelope with shaking fingers, pulling out the grainy black and white image for the 100th time. There, in the center of the photograph, was a tiny bean-shaped figure, so small, so vulnerable, so impossibly real. Her baby. Their baby. She pressed her hand against her still flat stomach, feeling nothing yet but knowing everything had changed. "Doctor." Chen had smiled warmly during the appointment, pointing out the flickering heartbeat on the monitor, explaining that everything looked healthy and normal. "Congratulations," she'd said, as if this were simple, as if Elena's life weren't tangled up with a man who controlled half the city's underworld from the shadows. Damien Vale. Even his name carried weight in the darkness of the city's criminal underbelly. At 35, he'd built an empire that stretched from legitimate real estate holdings to operations the police could never quite prove. He was brilliant, ruthless, and utterly magnetic. Elena had fallen for him slowly, inevitably, like a stone sinking into deep water. She'd met him 2 years ago when his nephew had been admitted to the pediatric ward with a severe asthma attack. Elena had been the attending nurse, calm and efficient in the crisis, and Damien had watched her with those penetrating dark eyes as she'd stabilized the frightened child. Afterward, he'd thanked her with a restraint that suggested he wasn't accustomed to gratitude, and she'd thought that would be the end of it. But Damien Vale didn't forget. He'd shown up at the hospital a week later with a donation that funded an entire new wing of the children's unit. He'd asked her to dinner as though it were a casual afterthought, and Elena, sensible, cautious Elena, had said yes. Their relationship had been a secret from the beginning. Damien insisted on it, and Elena understood why. His world was dangerous, filled with enemies and shifting alliances. The fewer people who knew about her, the safer she remained. So they'd met in the shadows. Expensive hotel rooms, his private penthouse. Weekend getaways to remote locations where no one asked questions. For 2 years, she'd accepted the boundaries he'd set. She'd been content with the stolen hours, the passionate nights, the rare moments when Damien let his guard down and she glimpsed the man beneath the armor. She'd told herself it was enough, even as a small part of her heart had begun to hope for more. And then she'd missed her period. At first, she'd attributed it to stress. The hospital had been short-staffed, and she'd been pulling double shifts, running on caffeine and determination. But when the second week passed with no change, she'd bought a pregnancy test, her hands trembling in the pharmacy aisle as if she were purchasing something illicit. The 2 pink lines had appeared almost immediately, stark and undeniable against the white plastic. Elena had stared at them for a full 10 minutes, her mind racing through impossible calculations. They'd been careful, most of the time, except for that one night 3 months ago when Damien had been different, vulnerable in a way she'd never seen before, desperate and tender all at once. She'd made the appointment with Dr. Chen the next day, needing medical confirmation before she could begin to process the reality. And now, sitting in her car with the ultrasound image in her hands, Elena knew she couldn't keep this secret any longer. Damien deserved to know. Whatever happened next, he deserved the truth. The drive to his penthouse took 20 minutes through rain-slicked streets. Elena's heart hammered against her ribs the entire way, her mind rehearsing and discarding a dozen different ways to tell him. In the end, she decided simplicity was best. She would show him the ultrasound, tell him she was pregnant, and let him respond however he needed to. The doorman at Damien's building recognized her immediately, waving her through with a respectful nod. The private elevator required a key card that Damien had given her months ago, a small symbol of trust that had meant more to Elena than any expensive gift. As the elevator climbed toward the penthouse on the 42nd floor, she clutched the envelope against her chest and tried to steady her breathing. The doors opened directly into Damien's living space, a sprawling open-plan apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city's glittering skyline. On clear days, you could see for miles. Tonight, the rain obscured everything beyond the glass, turning the windows into dark mirrors that reflected the warm light from within. Damien stood with his back to her, phone pressed to his ear, his posture rigid with tension. He wore dark slacks and a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up, revealing the corded muscles of his forearms. Even from behind, he radiated the kind of controlled power that made people instinctively step back. "I don't care what Marcus thinks," Damien said into the phone, his voice low and dangerous. "The shipment moves on schedule or he answers to me personally. Are we clear?" He paused, listening, then ended the call without another word. When he turned and saw Elena standing by the elevator, his expression shifted. Surprise, then pleasure, then something more guarded. "Elena." He crossed the room in long strides, and for a moment she thought he might embrace her. Instead, he stopped just short, his dark eyes searching her face. "I wasn't expecting you tonight. Is everything all right?" She nodded, not trusting her voice yet. Damien frowned slightly, and she realized her nervousness must be written all over her face. "You're pale," he observed, reaching out to brush his fingers along her cheekbone. "Have you eaten? You've been working too hard again." The tenderness in his voice nearly undid her carefully maintained composure. This was the Damien that only she got to see, the man behind the reputation, capable of softness even if he rationed it carefully. "I'm fine," Elena managed, though her voice came out shakier than she'd intended. I need to talk to you about something important." Damien's expression immediately became more alert, his mind already running through possibilities, assessing threats. It was what made him so effective in his world, this constant vigilance, this assumption that danger lurked around every corner. "What's wrong?" he asked, and there was steel beneath the concern now. Elena took a deep breath and pulled the envelope from her purse. Her hands were shaking so badly she nearly dropped it. "I went to the doctor today," she said quietly, "for a checkup. And I found out—" Her voice caught, and she had to swallow hard before continuing. "I found out I'm pregnant." For a moment, Damien didn't move, didn't speak, didn't even seem to breathe. He stood frozen, staring at her as if she'd just spoken in a language he didn't understand. The silence stretched between them, heavy and suffocating. Then Elena pulled the ultrasound image from the envelope and held it out to him with trembling fingers. 8 weeks, she whispered. "I know this is unexpected, and I know we never talked about this possibility, but no." The single word cut through the air like a blade. Damien's face had gone completely blank, all warmth draining away as if it had never existed. He took a step backward, away from her, away from the ultrasound image she still held extended toward him. "No," he repeated, and his voice was colder than Elena had ever heard it. "That's impossible." Confusion flooded through her, followed quickly by the first tendrils of fear. "Damien, I know it's a shock, but the doctor confirmed I can't have children." He bit out each word with brutal precision. "It's medically impossible. So whatever game you're playing, whatever you think you're going to accomplish with this lie—" "Lie?" Elena's voice rose despite her best efforts to stay calm. "Damien, I'm not lying. I would never—" "Give me that!" He snatched the ultrasound image from her hand with such sudden violence that Elena flinched. She watched in horror as Damien stared down at the picture, his jaw clenched so tightly she could see the muscle jumping beneath his skin. His dark eyes scanned the image with the same ruthless intensity he brought to every business negotiation, every threat assessment. "This could be anyone's ultrasound," he said flatly. You could have taken this from the hospital, printed it from the internet. Do you really think I'm stupid enough to fall for this? The words hit Elena like physical blows. She actually stumbled backward, her hand instinctively moving to her stomach as if to protect the tiny life inside from this verbal assault. "How can you say that?" she whispered, tears burning in her eyes. "After everything between us, how can you possibly think after everything between us?" Damien's laugh was harsh and utterly without humor. "Elena, let's be clear about what this relationship actually is. We're not building a future together. We're not in love. We have an arrangement that works because we both understand the boundaries." Each sentence landed like a hammer blow, systematically destroying the fragile hope Elena had allowed herself to nurture. She shook her head, refusing to believe what she was hearing. "That night 3 months ago," she said desperately. "You know it was different. You know there was something. One night." Damien cut her off with brutal efficiency. "One night where I had too much to drink and made a mistake. That doesn't change the fundamental facts." He held up the ultrasound image, and Elena's heart shattered as she watched him deliberately tear it in half. "I cannot have children." The sound of the paper ripping was somehow louder than the rain still hammering against the windows. Damien tore the image again and again until it was nothing but confetti in his hands, then let the pieces fall to the polished hardwood floor. "So whoever got you pregnant," he continued in that same terrible, emotionless voice, "it wasn't me. And I suggest you figure out who the real father is before you try this kind of con on someone less forgiving." Elena couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't process the complete demolition of everything she'd thought she knew about this man, about their relationship, about the future she'd barely begun to imagine. "Get out!" The command was quiet but absolute. Damien had already turned away from her, walking toward the windows, dismissing her as thoroughly as if she'd never existed. Elena stood frozen for another moment, staring at the scattered pieces of ultrasound image on the floor, the only proof of the life growing inside her, now reduced to meaningless fragments. Then her survival instincts kicked in, the same ones that had gotten her through nursing school while working 2 jobs, the same ones that had taught her to be strong when strength was the only option. She turned and walked to the elevator on legs that felt like they might give out at any moment. Her fingers shook as she pressed the call button. Behind her, she could hear Damien's phone ringing again, could hear him answer it with the same cold authority he'd just used to destroy her world. The elevator doors opened and Elena stepped inside. As they began to close, she looked one last time at the man she'd loved, the man she'd trusted with the most vulnerable parts of herself. Damien stood silhouetted against the city lights, already deep in conversation about some business matter, already moving on as if the last 10 minutes had never happened. The doors closed, and Elena was alone in the descending elevator, her hand pressed against her stomach, silent tears streaming down her face. 3 months had passed since that night, and Elena Hart had learned how to breathe again. It hadn't been easy. The first few weeks had been a blur of tears and anger and grief so profound she'd barely been able to function. She'd called in sick to work for the first time in 5 years, spending 3 days in bed, curled around the tiny life growing inside her, trying to understand how everything had gone so catastrophically wrong. But on the 4th day, Elena had looked at herself in the bathroom mirror, red-eyed, pale, hollow-cheeked, and made a decision. She could let Damien Vale's cruelty destroy her, or she could do what she'd always done: survive. She'd chosen survival. Now, at nearly 6 months pregnant, Elena stood in the small 1-bedroom apartment she'd rented in a quieter neighborhood across town, folding tiny onesies and arranging them in the second-hand dresser she'd painted a soft yellow. Her belly was round and firm beneath her loose cotton dress, and she'd felt the baby moving inside her for the last month. Little flutters at first, now strong kicks that took her breath away. A girl. She was having a daughter. Elena had found out at her 20-week scan, and she'd cried in the ultrasound room, not from sadness this time, but from overwhelming love for this tiny person she already knew she'd die to protect. The apartment was nothing like Damien's penthouse. It was small, with older appliances and water stains on the ceiling that the landlord kept promising to fix. But it was hers. She'd signed the lease, paid the deposit with money she'd saved, and slowly transformed it into a home. The nursery was taking shape in the corner of her bedroom, a crib she'd assembled herself, A changing table from a thrift store, soft blankets and stuffed animals from her coworkers at the hospital who'd thrown her a surprise baby shower. Elena had been touched to tears by their kindness, by the way they'd rallied around her when she'd quietly explained she'd be raising the baby alone. None of them knew who the father was. Elena had kept that secret locked tight in her chest, knowing that even speaking Damien's name could bring his dangerous world crashing back into her carefully rebuilt life. She'd disappeared from his orbit completely, changed her phone number, blocked his email, avoided the restaurants and hotels where they used to meet. For 3 months, she'd heard nothing from him. No apology, no attempt at contact, nothing. The silence hurt more than she wanted to admit, but it also confirmed what she needed to know. Damien Vale had meant every word he'd said that night. She was nothing to him. The baby was nothing to him. So Elena had built a new life without him. She'd thrown herself back into her work at the hospital, finding solace in caring for sick children and their frightened parents. She'd attended prenatal classes alone, practicing breathing techniques with a pillow as her partner. She'd read every parenting book she could find, determined to be enough for her daughter even if she had to do it all herself. The loneliness was the hardest part, not the physical challenges of pregnancy. The morning sickness that had lasted well into her second trimester, the exhaustion, the aching back and swollen ankles. Those were manageable. But the loneliness of facing this enormous life change without a partner, without someone to share the first ultrasound or the first kick or the first time she'd heard her daughter's heartbeat, that hollow ache never quite went away. Elena finished folding the last onesie and straightened up, pressing her hand against the small of her back. Her daughter immediately kicked as if sensing her mother's discomfort, and Elena smiled despite the pain. "I know, sweet girl," she murmured, rubbing her belly in slow circles. "Mama's tired, but we're okay. We're going to be just fine." A sharp knock on the door startled her from the moment. Elena frowned, glancing at the clock. It was nearly 9 in the evening, too late for deliveries, and she wasn't expecting anyone. Her few friends from the hospital always called before visiting. She moved to the door cautiously, checking the peephole first. The security in this building wasn't great, and a woman alone needed to be careful. What she saw on the other side made her blood run cold. Damien Vale stood in her hallway, looking exactly as he had 3 months ago and completely different all at once. He wore a dark coat over an expensive suit, his hair slightly disheveled as if he'd been running his hands through it. But it was his face that shocked her, the raw anguish written across features that were usually so carefully controlled. Elena's hand went to her throat, her heart hammering so hard she felt dizzy. Every instinct screamed at her not to open the door, to pretend she wasn't home, to protect herself and her baby from whatever new cruelty he'd come to deliver. But some part of her, the part that had loved him, that had believed in him despite all evidence to the contrary, needed to know why he was here. She opened the door, but left the chain engaged, creating a narrow gap through which she could see him without allowing him entry. "Elena." Her name came out rough, almost broken. "Please, I need to talk to you." "No." The word came more easily than she'd expected. Elena kept her voice level, betraying none of the panic racing through her veins. "You said everything you needed to say 3 months ago. There's nothing left to discuss." "There's everything to discuss." Damien moved closer to the door, and she could see his eyes now, those dark, penetrating eyes that had once made her feel seen and desired. Now they looked haunted. "Please, Elena, 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking." "And if I say no?" She lifted her chin, refusing to be intimidated even as her pulse raced. "Will you leave? Or will you force your way in like you force everything else in your life?" Pain flickered across his face, so raw and genuine that Elena almost faltered. Almost. "I deserve that," Damien said quietly. "I deserve worse than that. But please, just give me 5 minutes to explain. After that, if you want me gone, I'll go. You'll never see me again." Elena hesitated, her hand resting protectively on her belly. Her daughter kicked again, a strong, insistent movement, and Elena made her decision. She closed the door just long enough to unhook the chain, then opened it wider, stepping back to let Damien enter. But she didn't move far from the door, keeping her escape route clear, her body angled to protect her stomach from view. Damien stepped into the small apartment, and Elena watched his eyes take in everything. The modest furnishings, the cheerful yellow walls she'd painted herself, the corner of the room where the nursery was taking shape. His gaze lingered on the crib, the tiny clothes, the stuffed animals, and something in his expression crumpled. "You kept it," he said, so softly she almost didn't hear. "The baby. You kept her." Elena's voice was sharp. "I kept her. My daughter. And before you start with the accusations again, yes, she's yours. Not that it matters anymore." Damien turned to look at her fully for the first time, and that's when his eyes dropped to her belly. Elena saw the exact moment he registered her pregnancy, the way his whole body went rigid, his face draining of color as he stared at the undeniable proof of the life she was carrying. He couldn't seem to finish the sentence. 6 months pregnant, Elena supplied coldly. Due in early October. A girl, in case you're curious. Perfectly healthy, according to all the tests. And yes, Damien, she's yours. She's always been yours. But you made it very clear what you thought of that possibility. She watched him struggle to process the information, watched the play of emotions across his face, shock, disbelief, and something that might have been grief or joy or terror. It was impossible to tell. "I was wrong." The words came out hoarse, barely audible. Damien took a step toward her, then stopped when Elena immediately backed up, her hand going protectively to her stomach. "Don't," she warned. "Don't come any closer." He raised his hands slowly, palms out, in a gesture of surrender that looked alien on a man used to commanding every situation. "Please, just listen. I was wrong about everything. I couldn't." He broke off, frustration and anguish warring in his expression. "Can we sit down, please?" Elena gestured toward the small couch, remaining standing herself as Damien sank onto the worn cushions. He looked out of place in her humble apartment, this dangerous, powerful man surrounded by secondhand furniture and cheerful nursery decorations. "Talk," she said flatly. "You have 4 minutes left." Damien ran a hand through his hair, and Elena noticed it was shaking slightly. She'd never seen Damien Vale anything less than perfectly controlled. Seeing him like this, vulnerable, uncertain, would have moved her 3 months ago. Now it only made her more wary. 5 years ago, he began, his voice low and rough, I was in a relationship. Her name was Victoria. We were together for 2 years, and I was... He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. I thought I loved her. I was planning to propose. Elena said nothing, waiting. She'd never heard Damien mention any previous relationship, had never asked about his past. Their arrangement had been about the present, not history. Victoria got pregnant, Damien continued. She told me she was 8 weeks along. I was shocked, but I was also... His voice cracked slightly. I was happy. Terrified, but happy. I started imagining a future I'd never let myself want before. He fell silent for a moment, staring at his hands. When he spoke again, his voice was hollow. 2 weeks later, Victoria lost the baby. Or that's what she told me. She was devastated, inconsolable. I did everything I could to support her, but she pulled away. Eventually, she told me she needed space, needed time to heal. We broke up. Elena could see where this was going, could feel the pieces clicking into place, but she stayed quiet, letting him continue. 3 months after that, I saw Victoria at a charity gala. She was with someone else, a business rival of mine. And she was pregnant. Very obviously pregnant. More pregnant than she should have been if she'd lost my baby when she said she had. Damien's hands clenched into fists on his knees. I confronted her, demanded the truth, and she laughed at me. Told me there had never been a pregnancy. She'd faked the whole thing, the positive test, the ultrasound, the miscarriage, as some twisted power play. She wanted to see if I was serious about her, wanted to watch me scramble to prove myself worthy of being a father. That's horrible, Elena said quietly, and meant it, but she kept her voice neutral, refusing to let sympathy soften her defenses. But it doesn't explain what you did to me. After Victoria, I was angry, humiliated. But more than that, I was relieved. Damien looked up at her, and the raw honesty in his eyes was almost painful to witness. Because I'd realized during those 2 weeks that I didn't actually want children. I'd convinced myself I did because I thought that's what I was supposed to want. But the truth was, the idea terrified me. My world is violent, Elena, dangerous. The idea of bringing an innocent child into that darkness, he shook his head. So I told myself that Victoria had done me a favor. I got tested, determined to make sure I could never be put in that position again. And the doctor told me my sperm count was extremely low, not impossible to conceive naturally, but unlikely, especially given my age and stress levels. Elena's breath caught. So when you told me you were pregnant, every defense mechanism I had slammed into place. Damien's voice was anguished now. All I could see was Victoria laughing at me. All I could think was that history was repeating itself, that you were trying to trap me, manipulate me, play some game I didn't understand. So you destroyed the ultrasound and threw me out of your life. Yes. The word was barely a whisper. And the moment you left, I knew I'd made a catastrophic mistake. But I was angry, and I was terrified, and I convinced myself I'd done the right thing. I told myself you'd come back, that we'd talk rationally, that I'd make you understand why I reacted the way I did. I changed my number, Elena said coldly. I moved. I disappeared from your life because you made it very clear you thought I was a liar and a con artist carrying another man's bastard. Damien flinched at the harsh words, but he didn't deny them. I know, and I told myself that proved I was right, that if you were telling the truth, you would have fought harder, demanded a paternity test, refused to leave. I was 8 weeks pregnant, devastated, and you'd just ripped up the ultrasound of my baby. Elena's voice shook despite her best efforts to stay calm. Forgive me for not having the strength to fight with a man who'd made it abundantly clear he wanted nothing to do with me or my child. Our child. Damien stood abruptly, and Elena took an instinctive step back. He noticed immediately and froze, his hands raised again in that gesture of surrender. I'm sorry. I won't hurt you. I would never hurt you. You already did. The simple truth of those words hung in the air between them. Damien looked as though she'd struck him, and Elena felt a bitter satisfaction at finally seeing her pain reflected back at her. You're right, he said quietly. I did, and nothing I say can undo that. But Elena, please, you have to understand. I didn't know. I thought I was protecting myself from being manipulated again. I thought... What changed? Elena interrupted. Why are you here now? 3 months of silence, and suddenly you're at my door with apologies and explanations? Damien pulled something from his inner jacket pocket, a piece of paper, folded and creased as if it had been handled many times. He held it out to her, and after a moment's hesitation, Elena took it. It was a medical report. She scanned the technical language, her nursing background helping her understand the jargon, until she found the relevant section. Then her eyes widened. The fertility specialist I saw 5 years ago retired, Damien explained as she read. His practice closed, and all his patient records were transferred to a new clinic. They did a routine audit and found an error in my file. The extremely low sperm count test result had been meant for a different patient. My actual results were completely normal. Better than normal, actually. Elena looked up from the report, her mind reeling. So you can have children? I can have children, Damien confirmed. I always could. For 5 years, I've been operating under false information, making decisions based on a lie that was never even intentional, just a clerical error that shaped my entire life. He took a step closer, and this time Elena didn't move away. When I got that call from the new clinic, my first thought wasn't relief. It was terror. Because if I could have children, then everything I'd told myself about you was wrong. You weren't lying. You weren't manipulating me. You were telling the truth. And I'd destroyed something precious because I was too damaged and too afraid to see it. You tore up the ultrasound, Elena whispered, tears burning in her eyes despite her best efforts to hold them back. You called our baby a bastard. I know. Damien's voice broke completely. I know, and there's no apology big enough for what I did to you. But Elena, please, I'm begging you, give me a chance to make this right. Let me be part of this. Let me be a father to our daughter. Your time's up, Elena said, her voice surprisingly steady despite the tears streaming down her face. You said 5 minutes, and I've given you more than that. Now I'm asking you to leave. Elena, leave, Damien. She moved to the door, opening it wide. You don't get to come back after 3 months and expect everything to be forgiven just because you have a medical report. You broke something that can't be fixed with explanations. You made me feel worthless. You made me question everything I knew to be true. And you did it so thoroughly that even now, even pregnant with your daughter, I can still hear your voice calling her someone else's bastard. Damien looked shattered, but he moved toward the door as she'd asked. When he reached her, he stopped, looking down at her with such naked longing that Elena had to look away. "I love you," he said softly. "I know I have no right to say that now. I know it doesn't change anything. But I need you to know that what we had, what I threw away, it wasn't just an arrangement to me. It hasn't been for a long time." Elena closed her eyes against the anguish in his voice. "If you loved me, you would have trusted me." "You're right." Damien stepped into the hallway, then turned back to face her. "But I'm not giving up, Elena. I'm going to prove to you that I've changed. I'm going to earn your trust back no matter how long it takes. And I'm going to be there for our daughter, whether you forgive me or not." "We'll see," Elena said quietly, and closed the door. She stood with her back against it, listening to his footsteps retreat down the hallway, listening to the elevator doors open and close. Only when she was certain he was gone did she let herself slide down to the floor, wrapping her arms around her belly, letting the tears come. And that terrified her more than anything else. The flowers arrived the next morning. Elena stood in her doorway, staring at the enormous bouquet of white roses and lilies that the delivery man had just handed her. There must have been 36 stems at least, arranged in a crystal vase that probably cost more than her monthly rent. A small cream envelope was tucked among the blooms. "Sign here, please," the delivery man said, holding out an electronic pad. Elena signed automatically, her mind still processing. She carried the heavy arrangement inside and set it on her small kitchen table, where it immediately dominated the entire space. The flowers were beautiful, elegant and expensive, and completely inappropriate. She pulled the card from the envelope with trembling fingers. "For our daughter. I hope she knows how loved she already is. D." Elena crumpled the card in her fist, anger and something dangerously close to longing warring in her chest. This was exactly what Damien did. He threw money at problems, used grand gestures to smooth over the hard conversations, the real work of earning trust. She should throw the flowers away, send them back, make it clear that he couldn't buy his way into their lives. Instead, she found herself touching one of the soft petals, breathing in the delicate scent, imagining what it would be like to accept the apology they represented. By the end of the week, her apartment looked like a florist shop. More flowers arrived every day, sunflowers and orchids and exotic blooms she couldn't even name. Then came other gifts: a state-of-the-art baby monitor, an expensive stroller that converted into a car seat, a rocking chair made of polished oak that must have cost thousands. Each delivery came with a card, and each card mentioned their daughter. For her midnight feedings, for her first rides through the park, for the stories you'll tell her before bed. Elena wanted to refuse them all, wanted to send everything back with a note telling Damien that material things meant nothing. But her practical side won out. She was raising a baby alone on a nurse's salary. Pride was a luxury she couldn't afford, so she kept the gifts, telling herself it had nothing to do with forgiveness, that she was simply being smart. The truth was more complicated, and Elena knew it. 2 weeks after Damien had shown up at her door, Elena was leaving the hospital after a long shift when she found him leaning against her car in the parking garage. He wore jeans and a dark jacket, looking more casual than she'd ever seen him, but his eyes held the same intensity they always had. "I'm not stalking you," he said before she could speak. "I just wanted to ask if you'd let me take you to dinner. Somewhere public, your choice. Just to talk?" "No." Elena unlocked her car, trying to ignore how her heart had jumped at the sight of him. "I already told you." "1 hour," Damien interrupted. "That's all. You can leave whenever you want. But please, Elena, I'm trying to do this right. I'm trying to respect your boundaries while also showing you that I'm serious. Just dinner, that's all I'm asking." She should have said no again, should have gotten in her car and driven away. Instead, Elena heard herself say, "There's a diner 2 blocks from here. I'll meet you there in 10 minutes. And Damien, if you're even 1 minute late, I'm leaving." Relief flooded his face, so raw and genuine that Elena had to look away. "I'll be there in 5. He was already seated in a corner booth when Elena arrived, and he stood as she approached, an old-fashioned gesture that reminded her of the man she'd first fallen for, the one who could be unexpectedly courteous beneath all that ruthless power. The diner was crowded and noisy, filled with hospital staff grabbing dinner between shifts and families with small children. It was about as far from the elegant restaurants Damien usually frequented as possible, and Elena had chosen it deliberately. She wanted him out of his element, wanted to meet on neutral ground where his wealth and influence meant nothing. "Thank you for coming," Damien said as she slid into the booth across from him. His eyes went immediately to her belly, now impossible to hide beneath her scrubs. "How are you feeling? Are you having any complications?" "I'm fine," Elena said curtly. "The pregnancy is progressing normally. My doctor is happy with everything." A waitress appeared with menus and water, giving them a moment of silence. Elena used it to study Damien's face, looking for the cold cruelty she remembered from that terrible night. Instead, she found exhaustion etched around his eyes, a new tension in his jaw. He looked like a man who hadn't been sleeping well. Good, she thought viciously. He should suffer at least a fraction of what she'd endured. "I want to come to your next appointment," Damien said once the waitress had taken their orders. "If you'll let me. I want to see her on the ultrasound, hear her heartbeat. I want to be part of this." "Why?" Elena demanded. "Why now, Damien? You had 3 months to change your mind, to come looking for me, to question whether you'd made a mistake. But you didn't. So what's really different? Is it just the medical report? Because if finding out you're fertile is the only reason you suddenly care, it's not." He leaned forward, his dark eyes intense. "The medical report was the catalyst. But Elena, I spent those 3 months trying to convince myself I'd done the right thing, trying to forget about you, trying to move on. And I couldn't. Every day I thought about you. Every night I lay awake remembering the look on your face when I tore up that ultrasound." His voice dropped lower, rougher. "I told myself you were better off without me, that my world was too dangerous, that I'd only end up hurting you more. But the truth is, I was a coward. I was terrified of wanting something I thought I could never have, so I destroyed it before it could destroy me." Elena's throat tightened, but she forced herself to stay cold. "That's a nice speech, Damien. Very moving. But words are easy. You've always been good with words when you needed something. Then let me prove it with actions." He reached across the table as if to take her hand, then stopped himself, curling his fingers into a fist instead. "Tell me what you need. Tell me what would make you believe I'm serious." "I need time," Elena said quietly. "I need you to understand that you can't just step back into my life as if nothing happened. You hurt me, Damien, worse than I've ever been hurt. And I won't let you hurt our daughter the same way. I won't." The promise came out fierce, absolute. "I swear to you, Elena, I will spend the rest of my life making sure she knows she's loved and wanted, that she's not a mistake, that she's," his voice cracked, "that she's the best thing that's ever happened to me." The waitress returned with their food, breaking the moment. Elena picked at her salad, her appetite gone despite the hunger that seemed to follow her everywhere these days. Across from her, Damien's burger sat untouched. "There's something else you need to know," he said after a long silence. "About my world, about the dangers." Elena's head snapped up. "What kind of dangers?" "The kind that come with being who I am." Damien's expression had gone hard, professional. "I have enemies, Elena. People who would use anyone close to me as leverage. For 2 years I kept you hidden, kept you safe by keeping you secret. But if I acknowledge this baby, if I claim her publicly as mine, don't!" Elena's voice was sharp. "Don't you dare use your criminal lifestyle as an excuse to deny her again." "That's not what I'm doing," Damien met her gaze steadily. "I'm telling you that claiming her means taking precautions, security, protection. I need to know you'll let me keep both of you safe." "From what exactly?" Elena demanded. "What aren't you telling me?" Damien was quiet for a long moment, seeming to weigh his words. "There's a man named Marcus Volkov. He runs the Russian operations on the east side. We've had an understanding for years, but recently he's been pushing boundaries, testing my control. If he knew I had a child—" "Stop." Elena held up her hand, nausea rolling through her that had nothing to do with pregnancy. "I don't want to hear this. I don't want to know the details of your illegal operations or your gang wars or whatever this is." "It's not a gang war," Damien said patiently. "It's business. And whether you want to hear it or not, it's the reality of who I am. I'm not going to lie to you anymore, Elena. Not about this, not about anything." She stared at him, seeing the truth written clearly across his face. This was who Damien Vale was. Not just the tender lover who'd held her through the night, not just the cruel stranger who'd destroyed her trust, but all of it. The whole complicated, dangerous, morally ambiguous reality of the man who'd fathered her child. I need to think about this, Elena said finally. About all of it. I need time to process. Take all the time you need. Damien pulled out his wallet and left several bills on the table, far more than the meal cost. But Elena, I meant what I said. I'm not going anywhere. Whatever you decide, I'm going to be here. Elena stood, suddenly desperate to escape the intensity of his presence, the way he made her feel things she'd sworn not to feel anymore. The gifts need to stop, she said. No more flowers, no more expensive baby furniture. If you want to prove you're serious, prove it by respecting my boundaries. All right. Damien stood as well, and for a moment they faced each other across the worn diner table. Can I ask one thing? What? When's your next appointment? Elena hesitated, then pulled out her phone and showed him the calendar reminder. Thursday, 2 o'clock at the Women's Health Center on Maple Street. Damien committed the information to memory with the same focus he brought to everything. Can I be there? Every instinct screamed at Elena to say no, to keep him away from this intimate connection with their daughter, but she thought about the little girl growing inside her, about the questions she'd ask someday about her father. Could Elena really deny her daughter the chance to have Damien in her life if he was genuinely trying to change? Yes, she said quietly. You can be there. But Damien, if you miss this appointment, if you're late or you don't show up, that's it. No more chances. I'll be there. The promise carried the weight of a blood oath. I swear it. Elena nodded and turned to leave, but Damien's voice stopped her. Elena? Thank you for giving me this chance. I know I don't deserve it. She looked back at him, this powerful, dangerous man who looked almost vulnerable in the harsh fluorescent lighting of the diner. You're right, she said softly. You don't. But she deserves a father who wants her. So I'm not doing this for you, Damien. I'm doing it for our daughter. Thursday arrived wrapped in golden autumn sunshine, the kind of perfect fall day that made Elena wish she could spend it anywhere but in a medical office. She'd barely slept the night before, anxiety churning through her every time she thought about Damien showing up, about what it would mean to let him into this part of her pregnancy. She arrived at the Women's Health Center 15 minutes early, checking in at the desk and taking a seat in the crowded waiting room. Pregnant women in various stages filled the chairs, some with partners, some alone. Elena watched a young couple in the corner, the man's hand resting protectively on his wife's belly, both of them laughing at something on his phone. That could have been us, she thought, and the loss of it hit her all over again. 2 o'clock came and went. Elena's name was called, and she stood, her heart sinking despite the anger rising to replace it. Of course, Damien hadn't shown up. What had she expected? Men like him didn't change. They made promises and broke them with equal ease. Elena Hart? The nurse called again. I'm coming, Elena said, gathering her purse. She was 3 steps toward the hallway when the clinic door burst open and Damien rushed in, slightly out of breath, his usually immaculate appearance disheveled. I'm here, he said, his eyes finding hers immediately. I'm sorry. There was an accident on the highway. Traffic was completely stopped. I tried to call, but I have my phone on silent in medical offices, Elena finished quietly. Relief and irritation warred inside her. You're late. I know. I'm sorry. Damien approached her carefully, aware of all the eyes in the waiting room following his movement. But I'm here now. Please, don't shut me out because of bad traffic. The nurse was waiting, eyebrows raised. Elena made a split-second decision. Come on, she said to Damien. We're going to miss our slot. She saw the flash of hope in his eyes before he followed her down the hallway. The nurse led them to an examination room and handed Elena a gown. Change into this, open to the front. Dr. Morrison will be with you shortly. When the nurse left, Elena stood holding the gown, suddenly aware of how intimate this was. Damien had seen her body countless times before, but that was different. This was medical, vulnerable, in an entirely new way. I can wait outside, Damien offered, reading her hesitation. No. Elena straightened her shoulders. You wanted to be here. This is what being here looks like. She turned her back and changed quickly, hyper-aware of Damien's presence even though he'd moved to look out the window, giving her privacy. When she was settled on the examination table, he finally turned around. The look on his face when he saw her, the hospital gown draped over her pregnant belly, her bare feet dangling off the table, was something Elena couldn't quite name. Reverence, maybe. Or awe. "You're beautiful," he said softly. "I'm 6 months pregnant and retaining water in places I didn't know could swell." Elena tried for levity to cover the emotion threatening to overwhelm her. "Beautiful is a stretch. You're carrying my daughter." Damien moved closer, stopping a respectful distance from the examination table. "That makes you the most beautiful thing I've ever seen." Before Elena could respond, Dr. Morrison entered, a kind-faced woman in her 50s who'd been Elena's OBGYN for the past 4 months. She paused when she saw Damien, her professional smile not quite hiding her surprise. "Well, hello," she said warmly. "You must be the father. I'm Dr. Morrison." Damien Vale. He shook her hand with the same natural authority he brought to boardrooms and criminal negotiations. "Thank you for taking care of Elena and the baby." "It's my pleasure. They're both doing wonderfully." Dr. Morrison washed her hands and pulled on gloves. "All right, Elena, let's take a look at this little one. How's she been moving?" "Constantly," Elena said, "especially at night. I think she's training to be a kickboxer." "Doctor." Morrison laughed and began the examination, her experienced hands gentle on Elena's belly. Damien stood frozen, watching every movement with laser focus. When the doctor pulled out the ultrasound wand and squirted gel on Elena's stomach, she saw him lean forward slightly, unable to hide his anticipation. The monitor flickered to life, and suddenly there she was. Their daughter, so much bigger than the tiny bean shape from the first ultrasound. Elena could see her profile clearly now, the perfect curve of her nose, the delicate fingers she kept bringing to her mouth. "There's your girl," Dr. Morrison said warmly, adjusting the wand to get different angles. "Let's see. Good, strong heartbeat at 145 beats per minute. She's measuring right on track for 26 weeks. Head down already, which is great. And very active, as you've noticed." Elena barely heard the doctor's words. She was watching Damien, watching the transformation that came over his face as he stared at the ultrasound screen. His expression crumbled, tears streaming unchecked down his face, as he took in every detail of their daughter. "That's her," he whispered, his voice breaking. "That's really her." "Would you like to hear the heartbeat?" Dr. Morrison asked, and without waiting for an answer, she turned up the volume. The rapid whoosh, whoosh, whoosh filled the room, steady and strong and utterly perfect. Damien made a sound that might have been a sob, his hand coming up to cover his mouth. "Can I?" He looked at Elena, then at Dr. Morrison. "Can I touch? Can I feel her?" Elena's throat was too tight to speak, so she just nodded. Dr. Morrison smiled and stepped back slightly, giving Damien room to approach the examination table. His hand was shaking as he reached out, hovering over Elena's belly, as if afraid his touch might somehow damage what was inside. Elena took his hand in hers and guided it to the spot where their daughter was most active. As if on cue, the baby kicked, a strong, unmistakable movement directly against Damien's palm. He gasped, his eyes flying to Elena's face in wonder. That was her, Elena confirmed, and despite everything, despite the pain and the anger and the broken trust, she found herself smiling. "She's saying hello to her daddy." Damien's face crumpled completely. He bent forward, his forehead nearly touching the examination table, his hand still pressed against Elena's belly, where their daughter continued to move. His shoulders shook with silent sobs, and Elena found her own eyes filling with tears. "Doctor." Morrison discreetly turned away, making notes in her chart to give them privacy. When Damien finally composed himself enough to straighten up, his eyes were red but filled with a fierce determination Elena had never seen before. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice raw. "I'm so sorry for missing this, for nearly missing all of it." "You're here now?" Elena said quietly. "That's what matters." "Doctor." Morrison finished the examination and printed several ultrasound photos, handing them to Elena with a warm smile. "Everything looks perfect. I'll see you again in 4 weeks. And please, both of you, call if you have any concerns before then." When they were alone in the examination room again, Damien helped Elena sit up, his hands gentle and careful. She changed back into her regular clothes while he studied the ultrasound photos with the intensity usually reserved for multi-million-dollar contracts. Can I have one? He asked, looking up at her. Please? Elena pulled out one of the photos and handed it to him. Damien took it like it was made of precious crystal, his fingers trembling slightly. Thank you, he said, for letting me be here, for letting me see her. They walked out of the clinic together into the golden afternoon sunshine. Damien's car was parked next to hers, a sleek black sedan that probably cost more than most people's houses. The driver stood nearby, and Damien waved him off when he moved to open the door. Elena, Damien said as she unlocked her modest Honda, there's something I need to tell you, something I should have said that first night I came to your apartment. She waited, her hand on the car door. I love you. The words came out steady, certain. Not because of the baby, not because I feel guilty or obligated. I love you because you're strong and kind and you see the good in people even when they don't deserve it. I love you because you made me want to be better. And I love you because when I close my eyes, the only future I can imagine is one with you in it. Elena's breath caught. Damien, I'm not asking you to say it back, he continued. I'm not asking for anything except the chance to keep proving it, but I needed you to know. Whatever happens between us, whatever you decide, that's the truth. I love you, and I love our daughter, and I will spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of both of you. He didn't wait for a response, just opened his car door and slid inside. But before the door closed, he looked at her one more time. I meant what I said in the diner. I'm not going anywhere, Elena. Not this time. The car pulled away, leaving Elena standing in the parking lot, one hand on her belly, her mind spinning. She should feel angry at his presumption, frustrated by his declarations. Instead, she felt something dangerous unfurling in her chest, something that felt dangerously like hope. Her daughter kicked, and Elena looked down at her belly with a rueful smile. Your daddy is very complicated, she told the baby, and I have no idea what we're going to do about him. Over the next few weeks, Damien was everywhere. Not physically. He respected her boundaries, didn't show up at her apartment uninvited, didn't overwhelm her with constant contact, but his presence was felt in 1,000 small ways that slowly began to reshape Elena's carefully maintained defenses. He started with the practical things. Elena came home from work one day to find that her building's broken elevator had been repaired, something the landlord had been promising to fix for months. The building manager mentioned casually that an anonymous benefactor had covered the cost. The next week, Elena's car started making a concerning rattling noise. She made an appointment at a mechanic, planning to use the small emergency fund she'd been saving for the baby. But when she arrived, the mechanic told her someone had already paid for a full service and any necessary repairs. Guy called ahead, the mechanic explained. Said to make sure everything was perfect, spare no expense. Must be a good friend. Elena knew exactly who it was, and she should have been angry at the presumption. Instead, she found herself touching her belly and thinking about a man who was trying to take care of them in the only way he knew how. The gifts were different now, too. No more extravagant flower arrangements or luxury items. Instead, Elena found parenting books tucked into her hospital locker, well-worn copies with notes in the margins, as if Damien had read them carefully before passing them on. She found prenatal vitamins in her preferred brand waiting at the pharmacy, the prescription mysteriously already filled and paid for. Small things. Thoughtful things. Things that showed he was paying attention. He texted occasionally, never demanding responses, just sharing moments of his day. A photo of a sunset from his office window, a link to an article about infant sleep patterns. Once, late at night, a simple message. Thinking about you both. Hope you're resting. Elena found herself looking forward to these small communications more than she wanted to admit. She even started responding, short replies at first, then gradually longer ones. They texted about the baby, about Elena's cravings, about the nursery she was still trying to finish on her limited budget. The breakthrough came 3 weeks after the ultrasound appointment. Elena was struggling to assemble a bookshelf for the nursery, the instructions proving incomprehensible, when her phone rang. Damien's name flashed on the screen. Hello? She answered, slightly out of breath from wrestling with the furniture. You sound stressed. His voice was warm with concern. What's wrong? I'm trying to put together a bookshelf and failing miserably. Elena sat back on her heels, surveying the scattered pieces with frustration. The instructions are in Swedish or Finnish or something equally unhelpful. I could come over and help, Damien offered carefully. If you'd let me. Elena hesitated. Letting him into her apartment again felt like crossing a line, like admitting he was becoming part of her life in a way she wasn't sure she was ready for. Please, Damien added. I'm good with tools, and you shouldn't be lifting heavy furniture in your condition. Just let me help, Elena. No strings attached. Fine, she said before she could overthink it. But just for the bookshelf, and then you leave. I'll be there in 20 minutes. He arrived in 15, dressed casually in jeans and a dark t-shirt that showed off the lean muscles of his arms. He carried a professional-grade toolbox in one hand and a bag from Elena's favorite Thai restaurant in the other. You said you were craving pad Thai last week, he explained at her questioning look. I thought you might be hungry. They ate first, sitting on Elena's small couch, the food warm and perfect between them. Damien asked about her day at the hospital, and Elena found herself telling him about the premature twins who'd been transferred to the NICU, about the little girl with leukemia who'd finally smiled after weeks of treatment. He listened with genuine interest, asking thoughtful questions, and Elena realized how much she'd missed this, having someone to share her day with, someone who cared about the small details of her life. After dinner, Damien tackled the bookshelf with efficient competence, the scattered pieces coming together under his skilled hands. Elena sat nearby, supposedly reading, but actually watching him work. There was something mesmerizing about seeing this powerful, dangerous man kneeling on her nursery floor, carefully assembling furniture for their daughter. Hand me that small screwdriver, he asked, and Elena passed it to him, their fingers brushing. The contact sent electricity up her arm, and from Damien's sharp intake of breath, he felt it too. Almost done, he said, his voice slightly rougher. Where do you want it? Elena pointed to the corner near the window, where afternoon light would be perfect for reading to the baby. Damien moved the completed bookshelf into place, then stepped back to examine his work. It looks good, Elena admitted. Thank you. My pleasure. He started packing up his tools, and Elena felt a sudden reluctance to see him leave. Before she could second-guess herself, she heard herself say, Do you want to feel her? She's been kicking like crazy all afternoon. Damien froze, his eyes finding hers with cautious hope. Are you sure? Elena nodded and guided his hand to her belly. Their daughter, as if recognizing her father's touch, immediately began a series of strong kicks and rolls. Damien's face lit up with pure joy. She's so active, he marveled. Does she ever sleep? Not when I'm trying to, Elena said with a laugh. She's most active at night. I think she's already practicing to keep us up. The word us hung in the air between them, intimate and loaded with possibility. Damien's thumb moved in gentle circles over Elena's belly, his touch reverent. I've been thinking about names, he said quietly. If you're open to suggestions. What did you have in mind? Sophia. It means wisdom. He looked up at her, his dark eyes intense. And she'll be wise having you as her mother. Elena's throat tightened. It's beautiful, she whispered. Sophia Vale. Or Sophia Hart, Damien said quickly. Or Hart Vale, whatever you want. I want her to have a name as perfect as she's going to be. They stayed like that for a long moment, Damien's hand on Elena's belly, their daughter moving between them, the future suddenly feeling less terrifying and more possible. I should go, Damien finally said, though he made no move to pull away. You need rest. Damien? Elena caught his hand before he could step back. Thank you. For the bookshelf, for everything. He lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles with old-fashioned courtliness. Thank you for letting me be here, for giving me this chance. After he left, Elena stood in the nursery, running her hand along the smooth wood of the bookshelf, imagining it filled with children's books, imagining reading to Sophia while Damien sat nearby, imagining a future that 3 months ago had seemed impossible. Her phone buzzed with a text from Damien. Sleep well, both of you. Elena smiled and typed back. We will. Good night, Damien. And for the first time in months, she actually meant it. The following weeks slipped into a rhythm that felt almost normal, almost like the life Elena had imagined before everything fell apart. Damien became a constant presence without being overwhelming, showing up for doctor's appointments with military punctuality, sending good morning texts that made her smile over her coffee, calling in the evenings just to hear about her day. He was careful, respectful of the boundaries she'd set, but persistent in a way that made Elena's carefully constructed walls begin to crumble. She was 7 months pregnant when everything changed. It started as an ordinary Saturday. Elena had the day off and was using it to finish the nursery, washing tiny clothes and organizing the dresser Damien had assembled the week before. She'd invited him over later to help hang curtains, and she found herself checking the clock more often than she wanted to admit, anticipating his arrival. Her phone rang just after noon. Damien's name appeared on the screen, and Elena answered with a smile. "You're early," she said. "I thought you weren't coming until 2. Elena, listen to me very carefully. Damien's voice was tight, controlled in a way that immediately set off alarm bells. I need you to pack a bag with essentials. Clothes for a few days, your medications, important documents. Can you do that right now?" The smile died on Elena's lips. "What's going on?" "I don't have time to explain everything, but there's been a situation with my business. Someone I trusted has turned, and they're using information about you and the baby as leverage." His words came fast, urgent. "I'm sending a car to your building. It'll be there in 10 minutes. Pack quickly and get ready to leave." Fear spiked through Elena's chest. "Damien, you're scaring me. What kind of situation? What do you mean they're using us as leverage?" "I mean that people know about you now. People who would hurt you to hurt me." His voice cracked slightly on the last words. "Please, Elena, I need you to trust me, just this once. Pack a bag and get ready to leave. I'll explain everything when you're somewhere safe." Elena's nurse training kicked in, the part of her that stayed calm in emergencies even when her mind was screaming. "Where are you sending me?" "I have a property outside the city. It's secure, protected. You'll be safe there until I can handle this." He paused, and she heard voices in the background, sharp and urgent. "The car is 8 minutes away. Please, Elena, for Sophia." The use of their daughter's name decided her. Elena moved through the apartment on autopilot, throwing clothes into a duffel bag, grabbing her prenatal vitamins and medical records, her laptop and phone charger. Her hands shook as she worked, adrenaline making everything feel surreal. She was zipping the bag when her apartment buzzer sounded. 7 minutes. Elena grabbed her purse and the duffel, took one last look at the nursery she'd worked so hard to create, and headed for the door. The driver waiting downstairs was a massive man in a dark suit, his expression professionally neutral, but his eyes constantly scanning the street. He took Elena's bag without a word and opened the back door of a black SUV with tinted windows. "Ms. Hart," he said in a deep voice, "I'm Marcus. Mr. Vale sent me to ensure your safety. Please get in." Elena hesitated on the sidewalk, every instinct screaming that getting into this car was crossing a line she couldn't uncross. This was Damien's world, the dangerous, violent world she'd tried so hard to stay away from. Once she got in this car, she was acknowledging that she and her baby were part of that world too. Her phone rang. Damien again. "Elena, please tell me you're in the car." "I don't know if I can do this," she whispered. "Damien, this is insane. Maybe I should just call the police. The police can't protect you from these people." His voice was raw with fear she'd never heard before. "Please, I know I'm asking you to trust me after I destroyed that trust. I know I have no right. But Elena, I am begging you, get in the car. Let me keep you safe." Elena looked at Marcus, at the open car door, at the street that suddenly felt exposed and dangerous. She thought about Sophia, about the tiny life depending on her to make the right choice. She got in the car. The drive took nearly 2 hours, winding through the city and into the countryside beyond. Marcus drove with efficient precision, his eyes constantly checking the mirrors, taking random turns that Elena suspected were designed to make sure they weren't followed. She tried calling Damien 3 times, but each call went to voicemail. The property, when they finally arrived, wasn't what Elena had expected. She'd imagined something ostentatious, a mansion that screamed wealth and power. Instead, Marcus pulled up to a large but understated house set deep in the woods, surrounded by a high stone wall and iron gates that swung open automatically as they approached. The house was beautiful in a quiet way, stone and timber construction that looked like it had been there for decades, with large windows that overlooked acres of forest. But Elena noticed other details too. The cameras positioned at every corner, the sophisticated security panel by the front door, the way Marcus did a complete sweep of the perimeter before allowing her inside. This wasn't just a country house. It was a fortress. "Mr. Vale will be here as soon as he can," Marcus said, showing her through rooms filled with expensive but comfortable furniture. "In the meantime, you have full access to the house. The kitchen is stocked. There's a library upstairs if you need something to read. Please don't go outside without notifying me first." "Am I a prisoner here?" Elena asked, hating how her voice shook. Marcus's expression softened slightly. "You're a guest under protection, Ms. Hart. Mr. Vale wants you comfortable, not confined, but he also wants you alive." He left her in a large bedroom with an attached bathroom, her duffel bag already placed on the bed. Elena sank onto the mattress, her hands instinctively going to her belly, where Sophia was kicking with unusual vigor, as if sensing her mother's distress. "It's okay, baby girl," Elena whispered. "Daddy's going to explain what's happening, and then we're going to figure out what to do." But as the afternoon faded into evening with no word from Damien, Elena's anxiety transformed into anger. She tried his number repeatedly, each call going straight to voicemail. She paced the bedroom, then explored the house, finding it empty except for Marcus, who seemed to materialize whenever she entered a new room. By the time headlights finally swept across the windows near midnight, Elena was furious. She heard the front door open, heard Damien's voice speaking in low tones with Marcus, and she stormed down the stairs to confront him. He looked exhausted, his usually immaculate suit rumpled, a bruise darkening along his jaw that hadn't been there that morning. But his eyes found hers immediately, and the relief in them was so profound that Elena's anger faltered. "Thank God," Damien breathed. "You're safe. You're both safe." "Safe from what?" Elena demanded. "You dragged me out of my home, sent me to this bunker in the woods, and then disappeared for 12 hours. I deserve answers, Damien, right now." "You're right." He ran a hand through his hair, and Elena noticed his knuckles were split and bruised. "Can we sit down, please?" They moved to the living room, settling on opposite ends of a leather couch. Marcus appeared long enough to hand Damien a glass of whiskey and Elena a cup of herbal tea, then disappeared again, giving them privacy. Damien took a long drink before speaking. "Do you remember me mentioning Marcus Volkov, the Russian who runs operations on the east side?" Elena nodded, her hand unconsciously moving to her belly. 3 months ago, I made a decision to start legitimizing my operations, moving money into legal businesses, cutting ties with some of the more dangerous elements of my organization. It's a long process, and it's been making certain people nervous. Damien's jaw clenched. Volkov in particular. He saw my decision to step back as weakness. He started making moves into my territory, testing boundaries. "What does this have to do with me?" Elena asked, though she was beginning to understand. "Everything changed when I acknowledged you. When I started showing up at your apartment, being seen at your doctor's appointments, making it clear that you and the baby matter to me." Damien's voice dropped. "Volkov has people everywhere. He found out about you, about Sophia, and he decided to use that information." Elena's blood ran cold. "Use it how?" "This morning, one of my men intercepted a communication. Volkov was planning to grab you from your apartment, use you as leverage to force me to hand over my operations to him." Damien's hands clenched into fists. "He was going to take you, Elena, take you and our daughter, and use you as bargaining chips." The room spun. Elena pressed her hand against her mouth, fighting nausea that had nothing to do with pregnancy. "Oh, God." "I shut it down," Damien continued, his voice hard. "I moved immediately, got you out before they could act. And then I spent the rest of the day making it very clear to Volkov and everyone else in this city that touching you means death. No negotiation, no mercy." Elena looked at the bruises on his face, the split knuckles, and didn't ask what he'd done. She wasn't sure she wanted to know. "So what now?" she asked quietly. "How long do I have to stay here? Days? Weeks?" "I don't know." The admission seemed to pain him. "I'm handling the situation, but these things take time. I need to make sure that every person who might consider using you as leverage understands exactly what will happen if they try." "I can't just hide here indefinitely, Damien." Elena stood, pacing to the window. "I have a job, patients who depend on me, a life I've built." "I know." He stood too, crossing the room but stopping short of touching her. I know, and I'm sorry. I never wanted my world to touch you like this. I tried so hard to keep you separate, to keep you safe, by keeping me secret. Elena turned to face him, by treating me like something to be hidden away. And now, when you finally acknowledge me publicly, this is what happens? I become a target? Yes. Damien's honesty was brutal. That's exactly what happened, and I take full responsibility. I should have been more careful. I should have anticipated this. You should have trusted me with the truth from the beginning. Elena's voice cracked. You should have told me what being with you really meant. Not just the romantic dinners and expensive gifts, but this. The danger. The violence. The fact that loving you comes with a price. I know. Damien's composure finally broke. And if I could go back and change everything, I would. But Elena, please understand, keeping you ignorant wasn't about not trusting you. It was about trying to protect you from exactly this situation. Well, your protection failed. The words came out harsh, and Elena saw them land like physical blows. I'm here anyway, hiding in your safe house, afraid for my baby because of choices you made in a world I never agreed to be part of. Silence fell between them, heavy and painful. Sophia kicked hard, and Elena winced, pressing her hand to her side. Are you all right? Damien asked immediately, concern overriding everything else. She's just active. Elena sat down heavily, suddenly exhausted. She's been kicking non-stop since we got here. I think she knows something's wrong. Can I? Damien gestured helplessly. Can I feel? Elena should have said no, should have maintained the anger, used it as armor against the fear threatening to overwhelm her. Instead, she found herself nodding, and Damien knelt in front of her, his hands gentle on her belly. Sophia kicked immediately, a strong movement that made Damien's face light up despite the tension between them. She's strong, he murmured, just like her mother. I'm not strong, Elena whispered. I'm terrified, Damien, terrified of what your world means for her, for us. Then let me make it right. He looked up at her, his dark eyes intense. Give me time to handle this, to make sure you're both safe. And then, he paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. And then, if you want to walk away, if you decide this life isn't what you want for Sophia, I'll understand. I'll set up trust for her, make sure she has everything she needs, but I won't force you to stay in my world. You're her father, Elena said. You can't just be a trust fund, Damien. She deserves more than that. Then tell me what you need. His hands were still on her belly, feeling their daughter move between them. Tell me how to fix this. Elena looked at this complicated, dangerous, impossible man who'd destroyed her trust and was now desperately trying to rebuild it. I need honesty. Complete honesty. No more protecting me from the truth. If we're going to do this, if we're going to be a family, I need to know what I'm getting into. All of it. All right. Damien nodded slowly. No more secrets. I'll tell you everything, but not tonight. Tonight, you need rest. You've been through enough. He stood, and Elena caught his hand before he could step away. Where are you going? To one of the other bedrooms. I'll stay here until this is resolved, but I don't want to make you uncomfortable. Stay here. The words came out before Elena could second-guess them. Just stay. I don't want to be alone tonight. Something shifted in Damien's expression, hope and caution warring together. Are you sure? Elena wasn't sure of anything except that the idea of being alone in this strange house, with threats she didn't understand lurking somewhere in the darkness, was unbearable. She nodded, and Damien settled into the armchair near the bed, clearly planning to keep watch. Not there, Elena said softly. Here, with us. Damien's throat worked as he swallowed hard. He kicked off his shoes and lay down on top of the covers, keeping a careful distance between them. But Elena, driven by fear and need and something deeper she didn't want to name, moved closer until her back was against his chest. His arm came around her waist, his hand resting protectively over their daughter. I've got you, he murmured against her hair. Both of you. I promise. Elena let herself relax into his warmth, feeling Sophia settle too, as if she recognized her father's presence. Tomorrow she'd demand answers. Tomorrow she'd figure out what came next. But tonight, she let herself feel safe in Damien's arms. Let herself imagine that maybe, somehow, this impossible situation could work out. She was almost asleep when Damien spoke again, his voice barely a whisper. I love you, Elena. Whatever happens, whatever you decide, that's not going to change. I love you, and I love our daughter. And I will spend the rest of my life making sure you're both safe and happy. Elena's eyes burned with tears, but she didn't respond. She wasn't ready to say the words back. Wasn't sure if she ever would be. But she laced her fingers through his where they rested on her belly and felt him tighten his hold on them both. The next morning brought a crisp autumn day, sunlight streaming through the bedroom windows and birds singing in the forest beyond. For a moment, waking in Damien's arms, Elena could almost pretend this was a romantic getaway rather than protective custody. Then she registered the voices coming from downstairs, multiple male voices speaking in low, urgent tones, and reality crashed back. Damien was already awake, though he'd clearly been trying not to disturb her. That's my security team, he explained at her questioning look. They're doing a full briefing. I need to go down there, but you should rest. No. Elena sat up, pushing hair out of her face. You promised me honesty. That starts now. I want to hear what they're saying. Damien looked like he wanted to argue, but he just nodded. Get dressed. I'll wait. 20 minutes later, Elena descended the stairs to find the living room transformed into a command center. 4 men in dark suits stood around a table covered with maps and photographs, and they all fell silent when she appeared. Gentlemen, this is Elena Hart, Damien said, the mother of my child. She's to be kept informed of all developments. Is that clear? A chorus of yes, sir, followed. Elena recognized Marcus, but the other 3 men were strangers, hard-faced professionals who looked at her with varying degrees of surprise and respect. Continue, Damien ordered, and one of the men launched into a report about Volkov's movements over the past 12 hours, about communications they'd intercepted, about allies who were beginning to distance themselves from the Russians' operations. Elena listened, trying to follow the coded language and veiled threats, trying to understand this world that Damien navigated with such ease. It was terrifying and fascinating in equal measure, seeing this side of him, the strategic mind, the absolute authority, the way grown men feared and respected him in the same breath. What about the leak? Damien asked. Do we know who gave Volkov the information about Elena? A tense silence fell. One of the men Elena didn't recognize cleared his throat. We've traced it back to someone inside your organization, sir. Someone close. Damien's expression went cold in a way that made Elena instinctively step back. Who? Your cousin, Michael. The name hit Damien like a physical blow. Elena saw him absorb it, saw the betrayal register across his face before he locked it down behind that professional mask. You're certain? We have phone records, money transfers. He's been feeding information to Volkov for the past 3 months, including details about Ms. Hart's address, her work schedule, her medical appointments. Elena felt sick. Someone had been watching her, tracking her movements, reporting back to people who wanted to use her as leverage. The violation of it made her want to shower and never stop. Where is Michael now? Damien's voice was deadly quiet. We have him contained, sir, waiting for your orders. I need to handle this personally. Damien turned to Marcus. Stay with Elena. Full security protocols. No one gets near this house without my explicit approval. He started toward the door, but Elena's voice stopped him. Damien, wait. What are you going to do? He turned back, and the look in his eyes was nothing like the tender man who'd held her last night. This was the crime boss, the dangerous predator, the man who'd built an empire on fear and blood. I'm going to make sure no one ever betrays me like this again. You're going to kill him, Elena's voice shook. Your own cousin. He put you and our daughter in danger. Damien's words were ice. He sold information that could have gotten you kidnapped, hurt, or worse. There's only one response to that. There are other ways. Elena moved between Damien and the door, knowing she was probably making a mistake but unable to stop herself. Legal ways. You could turn him over to the police, testify against him. This isn't your world, Elena. Damien's tone wasn't unkind, but it was final. And I won't apologize for doing what's necessary to protect my family. By becoming a murderer? The words hung in the air, brutal and honest. Damien's jaw clenched. I've done worse things for worse reasons. At least this time, I'm protecting the people I love." He left without another word, and Elena stood frozen in the living room, surrounded by men who looked at her with something like pity. She'd asked for honesty, for a window into Damien's real world. Now she had it, and the view was more terrifying than she'd imagined. Marcus approached carefully. "Ms. Hart, perhaps you should lie down. This has been stressful, and the baby—" "I'm fine." Elena cut him off, though her hands were shaking. I need some air. I can't let you go outside alone." "Then come with me." She was already moving toward the back door, desperate to escape the oppressive atmosphere of the house. "Just give me some space to breathe." They walked through the extensive gardens behind the house, Marcus maintaining a respectful distance while Elena tried to process everything. The property was beautiful, carefully maintained grounds that gave way to natural forest, a small pond reflecting the morning sky, stone pathways winding through beds of late-season flowers. Under any other circumstances, Elena would have found it peaceful. Now, she saw it for what it was, a gilded cage. Her phone buzzed, and she pulled it out to find a text from Damien. "I'm sorry you had to see that side of me, but I meant what I said. I will do anything to keep you both safe." Elena stared at the message, her thumb hovering over the keyboard. What could she say? That she understood? That she forgave him? That she was falling in love with him despite the violence and danger he represented? Instead, she typed, "Just come back safely. We need to talk." His response was immediate. "I will. I promise." The hours crawled by. Elena tried to read, tried to rest, tried to focus on anything except imagining what Damien was doing. She knew, logically, that he'd been part of this world long before she met him. That the blood on his hands wasn't new, but knowing it abstractly and confronting it directly were very different things. By the time Damien's car pulled up the drive in late afternoon, Elena had worn a path in the carpet from pacing. She met him at the door, searching his face for signs of what he'd done, but his expression was carefully neutral. "Is he—" Elena couldn't finish the question. "Michael is alive," Damien said quietly. "I didn't kill him, if that's what you're asking. But he understands what happens if he ever threatens my family again." Relief and horror mingled in Elena's chest. She didn't want to know what "understands" meant in this context. "Can we talk?" Damien asked. "Privately?" They went up to the bedroom, and Elena sat on the edge of the bed, watching Damien pace like a caged animal. When he finally spoke, his voice was raw. "I know what you're thinking, that I'm a monster, that our daughter deserves better than a father who solves problems with violence." "I'm thinking," Elena said carefully, "that you're a complicated man making choices in an impossible situation. I'm thinking that I don't understand your world, and maybe I never will. But I'm also thinking about Sophia, about what kind of life she's going to have if every time your business has a problem, we have to run and hide." "You won't." The promise came out fierce. "The situation with Volkov, it's being handled. Within the next 48 hours, he'll either be backing down or he'll be gone. Either way, you'll be safe." "And the next threat? And the one after that?" Elena stood, crossing to where Damien stood by the window. "You promised me honesty, so here's mine. I can't live like this. I can't raise our daughter in constant fear, always looking over our shoulder, wondering if today's the day someone decides to use us as leverage." "Then what do you want me to do?" Damien turned to face her, desperation clear in his eyes. "Tell me, Elena, do you want me to walk away? To give up my claim on her, let you raise her in peace?" "I want you to choose." The words came from somewhere deep inside, a place of brutal honesty Elena didn't know she possessed. "Choose us, Damien. Really choose us. Not the business, not the power, not the empire you've built. Choose to be a father and a partner and let the rest of it go. You're asking me to give up everything I am. I'm asking you to become something better." Elena placed his hand on her belly, where Sophia was kicking. "She's going to be here in 2 months. 2 months to decide what kind of man you want to be when she takes her first breath. 2 months to build a life that doesn't require bulletproof glass and armed guards." Damien's hand trembled against her stomach. "I don't know if I can." "Then we don't have a future." Elena's voice broke on the words, but she forced them out anyway. "Because I won't subject our daughter to this. I won't raise her in fear. If you can't leave this world behind, then Sophia and I will leave you behind." The ultimatum hung between them, stark and unforgiving. Damien looked at her with such anguish that Elena almost took the words back, almost said that they'd find another way, that they could make it work. But she thought about Sophia, about the tiny girl who would depend on them to keep her safe, to give her a childhood filled with love instead of danger, and she held firm. "I need time," Damien finally said. "Time to think, to plan. This isn't something I can just walk away from overnight." "You have until Sophia is born." Elena stepped back, creating distance between them. 2 months to figure out what matters more. And Damien, I hope you choose us. I really do. Because despite everything, despite the fear and the anger and the impossibility of it all, She stopped herself before the confession could escape, but Damien heard it anyway in the things she didn't say. "I love you too," he whispered. "That's why this is so terrifying, because I finally have something worth more than power, and I don't know how to protect it." "You protect it by letting the dangerous parts go," Elena said gently. "By choosing the light instead of the darkness. By being the man I fell in love with instead of the one you think you have to be." Damien pulled her into his arms, and Elena let herself be held, let herself believe that maybe, possibly, he could change. That love could be enough to transform a man built from violence into a father who chose peace. Outside, the sun was setting over the forest, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new choices. But tonight, wrapped in Damien's embrace with their daughter moving between them, Elena let herself hope. It was all she had left. The next 48 hours unfolded with agonizing slowness. Elena remained at the safe house while Damien disappeared for hours at a time, returning with new bruises and an expression that warned against asking questions. Marcus and the security team maintained constant vigilance, their presence a reminder that despite the peaceful forest setting, danger still lurked somewhere beyond the walls. Elena spent the time in restless limbo, caught between hope and fear. She walked the gardens with Marcus shadowing her steps, read every parenting book in the house's surprisingly well-stocked library, and talked to Sophia in long, whispered conversations about the impossible situation they'd found themselves in. "Your daddy is trying," she murmured one evening, her hands on her belly as she felt Sophia's strong kicks. "He's really trying, sweet girl. I just hope it's enough." On the third morning, Elena woke to find Damien sitting in the armchair beside the bed, watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Dawn light filtered through the curtains, painting everything in shades of gold and shadow. "How long have you been there?" she asked, her voice rough with sleep. "A few hours." He looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes, his jaw covered with stubble. "I didn't want to wake you." Elena sat up, suddenly alert. "What happened? Is it over?" "Volkov withdrew his operations from my territories last night. He's leaving the city entirely, relocating to the west coast." Damien's voice was flat, emotionless. "The threat is neutralized." Relief flooded through Elena so intensely she felt dizzy. "So we can go home? I can go back to my apartment?" "Not yet." Damien stood, moving to the window. "There are still loose ends to tie up, people who need to understand that coming after my family isn't an option. Give it another week, maybe 2. Then yes, you can go home." 2 more weeks? Elena heard the frustration in her own voice. "Damien, I've already been here 3 days. I need to get back to work, to my life." "I know." He turned to face her, and the anguish in his eyes stopped her protest. "But I need to know you're safe, both of you. Please, Elena, just a little more time." She wanted to argue, wanted to demand her freedom back. But looking at him, this powerful man reduced to pleading, Elena found herself nodding. "1 more week. After that, I'm leaving whether you think it's safe or not." "Fair enough." Damien crossed the room and sat on the edge of the bed, close but not touching. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Do you still mean it? The ultimatum you gave me?" His dark eyes searched hers. "About choosing between you and the business?" Elena's heart hammered against her ribs. "Yes, I meant every word." "Then I need to show you something." He pulled out his phone and handed it to her. On the screen was a legal document, dense with formal language. Elena scanned it, her nursing background making the medical and technical terms easier to parse than the legal ones. I don't understand, she said after a moment. What is this? It's a transfer of ownership, Damien explained. All of my legitimate businesses, the real estate holdings, the investment portfolios, the charitable foundations, are being consolidated under new management, clean management, with no ties to anything illegal. Elena looked up sharply. You're selling? I'm transitioning. Some operations I'm selling outright. Others I'm restructuring to remove myself from direct control. He ran a hand through his hair, and Elena noticed it was shaking slightly. The illegal operations, the ones that made Volkov and people like him see me as competition, I'm dissolving those entirely. You're walking away. Elena barely breathed the words, afraid that speaking them too loudly would make them untrue. I'm walking towards something better. Damien took the phone from her hands and set it aside, then captured both of her hands in his. I've spent the last 3 days meeting with lawyers, accountants, and business associates. I've called in favors, made deals, and burned bridges I spent years building, and I'm not done yet. But Elena, I want you to know, I'm choosing you. I'm choosing Sophia. I'm choosing the future instead of the past. Tears spilled down Elena's cheeks before she could stop them. Do you mean it? Really mean it? I've never meant anything more in my life. He lifted her hands to his lips, pressing kisses to her knuckles. It won't happen overnight. Unwinding an empire takes time, but I'm committed to this, to building a life where our daughter doesn't need armed guards and bulletproof glass. What will you do instead? Elena asked. You've spent your whole adult life in this world. What comes next? Honestly, I'm terrified to find out. Damien's laugh was shaky. But I'm also excited. I'm thinking about focusing on the legitimate real estate portfolio, maybe some consulting work. I've built businesses from nothing before. I can do it again, this time legally. Elena pulled one hand free and pressed it to his cheek, feeling the rough stubble beneath her palm. You're serious about this? I'm serious about you. He turned his face to kiss her palm. About being the father Sophia deserves. About becoming a man you can trust again. I'm starting to trust you, Elena admitted. Slowly. But Damien, you have to understand, trust isn't rebuilt with grand gestures. It's rebuilt with consistency, with showing up every day and doing the work. Then I'll show up every day. His voice was fierce with promise. For as many days as it takes. They sat together in the quiet morning light, Elena's hands in Damien's, Sophia kicking between them. For the first time since that terrible night when he'd torn up the ultrasound, Elena allowed herself to believe that maybe, possibly, they could survive this. The week that followed brought a different kind of tension. Not the sharp fear of immediate danger, but the slow burn of transformation. Damien spent his days managing the dissolution of his empire, taking calls in the study downstairs while Elena tried to maintain some semblance of normalcy in the upstairs bedroom. He kept her informed this time, showing her the contracts he was signing, explaining the deals he was making. Elena didn't understand all of it. The complex web of corporations and offshore accounts was beyond her expertise, but she appreciated his efforts at transparency. This building complex in the financial district, he explained one evening, showing her photographs on his tablet. I'm selling it to a development company out of Chicago. Clean money, legitimate business. The sale should finalize next week. How much are you losing? Elena asked. By walking away from everything so quickly? Damien shrugged. Millions, probably. But Elena, what's money compared to being able to hold my daughter without worrying that my past will destroy her future? She studied his face, looking for signs of regret or resentment, but found only determination. This was really happening. Damien Vale was dismantling the criminal empire he'd spent years building, and he was doing it for them. The realization should have made her feel relieved, grateful. Instead, Elena felt the weight of responsibility settling over her shoulders. What if he regretted this choice later? What if he looked at Sophia someday and saw not his beloved daughter, but the reason he'd given up everything? Stop, Damien said, and Elena realized he was watching her face. I can see what you're thinking, and you're wrong. This isn't a sacrifice I'm making grudgingly. This is the best decision I've ever made. You can't know that yet, Elena protested. You might feel differently in a year or 5 years, or I won't. He moved closer, taking her face gently in his hands. Elena, I've spent my entire adult life building power and wealth and influence. And you know what I learned? None of it matters. None of it fills the emptiness or makes you feel less alone. But you... His thumb brushed away a tear she hadn't realized had fallen. You and Sophia, you make me feel whole in a way nothing else ever has. What if it's not enough? Elena whispered. What if normal life, legal life, isn't enough to satisfy you? Then I'll learn to find satisfaction in other things. Damien's smile was soft. In watching Sophia take her first steps, in making you laugh, in building something legitimate that I can be proud to pass down to our daughter. Elena wanted to believe him. With everything in her, she wanted to trust that this transformation was real and lasting. But she'd been hurt too deeply to give her faith freely. Show me, she said finally. Keep showing me, every day, that this is what you really want. And maybe, someday, I'll be able to believe it completely. That's all I'm asking for. Damien pressed a kiss to her forehead. Time to prove myself. I can do that. The following morning, Elena woke to find the safe house in controlled chaos. Marcus and the security team were packing equipment, dismantling the command center in the living room, and speaking in the clipped, efficient tones of professionals wrapping up an operation. She found Damien in the kitchen, making breakfast with surprising competence. He looked up as she entered, and his smile was genuine, free of the tension that had marked the past week. Good morning, he said, gesturing to the stove. I'm making omelets, or attempting to. I'm not sure this qualifies as edible yet. What's going on? Elena asked, accepting the orange juice he poured for her. Why is everyone packing? Because you're going home today. Damien flipped the omelet with more confidence than the slightly burned edges warranted. The situation is resolved. Volkov is gone, the message has been sent, and I've put additional security measures in place that don't require you living in a fortress. Elena felt a surge of relief so strong she had to sit down. Really? We can really go home? Really? He plated the omelet and set it in front of her with a flourish. Eat up, we're leaving in an hour. The drive back to the city felt surreal. Elena watched the familiar landscape roll by, the highway exits she knew by heart, the skyline emerging on the horizon, and felt like she was returning from a much longer journey than a week. Everything looked the same, but she felt fundamentally changed. Damien's driver pulled up to her apartment building, and Elena noticed immediately that the broken security camera in the lobby had been replaced. A new doorman stood at the entrance, professional, alert, clearly more than just a friendly face. Security upgrade, Damien explained at her questioning look. The building hired a new firm. Better cameras, better protocols, you'll be safe here. You hired them, Elena said. It wasn't a question. I made a recommendation. The building manager made the final decision. His expression was carefully neutral. Can you blame me for wanting to know you're protected? Elena couldn't, really, and the security measure seemed reasonable rather than excessive. She let it go, too relieved to be home to start an argument. Her apartment looked exactly as she'd left it, though someone had clearly been inside. The refrigerator was stocked with fresh food, the plants had been watered, and a layer of dust that should have accumulated was conspicuously absent. Marcus has a key, Damien admitted. He's been checking on things while you were away, making sure everything was ready for your return. Thank you, Elena said softly. She walked through the small space, touching familiar objects, feeling herself settle back into her own life. The nursery corner, with its yellow dresser and carefully assembled bookshelf, welcomed her like old friends. I should go, Damien said from the doorway. Let you rest and get settled. But Elena, can I take you to dinner tomorrow? Somewhere public, your choice. I want to talk about what comes next. What comes next? Elena repeated. For us. For Sophia. He shifted his weight, looking almost nervous. For our future. If you'll let me be part of it. Elena studied him. This man who was trying so hard to be better, to be worthy of the second chance she was slowly giving him. Tomorrow is fine. There's a bistro near the hospital I like. Nothing fancy. Perfect. Damien's smile was warm with relief. I'll pick you up at 7. After he left, Elena sank onto her couch and let out a long breath. Sophia kicked energetically, and Elena laughed despite her exhaustion. We're home, baby girl, she murmured. Finally home. The next evening, Damien arrived exactly at 7, dressed casually in dark jeans and a button-down shirt. He looked younger like this, less intimidating, more like the man Elena had first fallen for 2 years ago. The bistro was cozy and warm. filled with the comfortable buzz of conversation and the rich smell of garlic and herbs. They were seated at a corner table, private but not isolated, and Damien seemed to relax in the casual atmosphere. "I've been thinking about something," he said after they'd ordered. "About the paternity test." Elena's stomach tightened. "What about it?" "I want to take one. Officially. Legally." At her sharp look, he quickly continued. "Not because I doubt you. Never because I doubt you, but because I want it on record, legal and binding, that Sophia is mine. I want my name on her birth certificate. I want to make sure that if anything ever happens to me, there's no question about her rights, her inheritance." "You've really thought about this," Elena said quietly. "I've thought about everything." Damien leaned forward, his dark eyes intense. "I want to do this right, Elena. Legal paternity, child support arrangements that are fair and documented, a custody agreement that protects Sophia's interests. I know we're not together, but I want to be a real father to her, on paper and in practice." "We should wait," Elena heard herself say, "until after she's born. To do the paternity test, I mean." Damien's expression shuddered slightly. "Of course, whatever you're comfortable with." "It's not about comfort." Elena reached across the table and took his hand. "It's about not putting any extra stress on the pregnancy. The test is safe, but why take unnecessary risks when we can wait a few more weeks and know for certain?" Understanding dawned in his eyes. "You're protecting her." "I'm protecting both of you," Elena corrected. "Because Damien, despite everything we've been through, despite all the mistakes and the pain, I do believe Sophia is yours. I've always known it. And I think deep down, you've known it too." "I have." His voice was rough with emotion. "From the moment I saw her on that ultrasound, even before that, I knew. But I was too scared to admit it." Their food arrived, providing a natural pause in the conversation. As they ate, Damien told Elena about the progress he was making in legitimizing his businesses, about meetings with lawyers and accountants, about the clean slate he was building. "It's terrifying," he admitted. "Starting over at my age, trying to build something legitimate after years of operating in the shadows. But it's also exciting. For the first time in my life, I'm building something I'll be proud to tell my daughter about." "She'll be proud of you," Elena said. "Not for what you were, but for who you chose to become." After dinner, they walked slowly back toward Elena's apartment, the autumn air crisp and cool. Damien kept a respectful distance, not trying to take her hand or pull her close, respecting the boundaries she'd established. "Can I ask you something personal?" Elena said as they neared her building. "Anything." "That night, 3 months ago, when everything was different between us, when you were—" She paused, searching for the right words. "You were vulnerable in a way I'd never seen before. What changed that night?" Damien was quiet for a long moment, and Elena thought he might not answer. Then he spoke, his voice low and rough. "It was the anniversary of my parents' death. They died in a car accident when I was 22, and every year on that date I fall apart a little. Usually I drink alone, but that year I wanted—" He paused. "I needed to be with someone who made me feel less alone. Someone who made me feel human instead of like the monster I'd become." "So you came to me," Elena finished softly. "I came to you, and you held me, asked no questions, just let me be broken for a night." Damien's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "That's the night Sophia was conceived. The night I was honest enough to admit I needed you, even if I wasn't brave enough to say it out loud." Elena's throat tightened. She'd known that night was different, had felt the shift in their relationship, but hearing him explain it made everything crystallize into sharp focus. "I should have told you then," Damien continued, "should have been honest about my feelings. But I was a coward, and it cost us 3 months of happiness we could have had." They'd reached her building. Elena turned to face him, studying the man who'd hurt her so deeply and was now trying so hard to make amends. "Come upstairs," she said. Damien's eyes widened. "Elena, just to talk," she clarified quickly. We're not, but I think we should talk, really talk, about everything." He followed her up to the apartment, and they settled on the couch with careful distance between them. Sophia immediately began kicking, and Damien's eyes went to Elena's belly with undisguised longing. "You can feel her," Elena offered. "If you want." Damien's hand was on her belly before she finished speaking, his face lighting up as Sophia kicked against his palm. "She's so active tonight." She likes when you're around, Elena admitted. She always moves more when you're here. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, Damien's hand on Elena's belly, their daughter moving between them. Finally, Elena spoke. I need you to understand something. What we had before, the secret relationship, the stolen moments, that can't be what we go back to. If we're going to do this, if we're going to try to be a family, it has to be different. I know, Damien said, and I want it to be different. I want to take you on real dates, introduce you to people as the mother of my child, be seen in public together. No more hiding. It's not just about being public. Elena turned to face him more fully. It's about partnership, equal partnership. You can't just make decisions about our lives and expect me to go along with them. You can't throw money at problems without consulting me first. I can't be the controlling bastard I've been trained to be, Damien finished. I know. And Elena, I'm going to mess this up sometimes. I'm going to fall back on old habits, try to control situations instead of trusting you. But I need you to call me on it when I do. I need you to hold me accountable. I can do that, Elena said. But Damien, you need to understand, I'm not looking for a protector or a provider. I'm looking for a partner, someone who sees me as an equal, who values my opinions and my choices. You're the strongest person I've ever met, Damien said quietly. You've survived my cruelty, built a life for yourself and Sophia on your own, and you've still found the grace to give me another chance. If that's not equal to anything I've ever accomplished, I don't know what is. Elena felt tears prick her eyes. This was what she'd needed to hear, not that he loved her, not that he wanted to protect her, but that he saw her strength and respected it. I'm scared, she admitted. Scared that you'll change your mind about going legitimate. Scared that your old life will come back to haunt us. Scared that I'm making a mistake by letting you back in. I'm scared too, Damien confessed. Scared that I'll fail you again. Scared that I'm not capable of being the man you and Sophia deserve. But Elena, I'd rather try and fail than not try at all. Then we try, Elena said. Together. But Damien, you need to know, if you hurt me again, if you lie or betray my trust, there won't be another chance. I can forgive once, maybe even twice. But 3 times, that's on me for being stupid enough to stay. You won't have to forgive me 3 times, Damien promised. I won't give you a reason to. He stood to leave, and Elena walked him to the door. At the threshold, he paused, looking down at her with such tenderness that Elena's breath caught. Can I kiss you? He asked. Not like before. Not because I'm taking what I want, but because I'm asking permission, respecting your choice. Elena's heart hammered. She should say no, should maintain the distance, should protect herself from falling too far too fast. Instead, she found herself nodding. Damien cupped her face gently in his hands and lowered his lips to hers. The kiss was soft, reverent, nothing like the passionate encounters of their past. It was a promise, a question, a beginning rather than a continuation of what they'd had before. When he pulled back, Elena's eyes were wet with tears. I love you, Damien whispered against her forehead. I know I've said it before, but Elena, I need you to hear it again. I love you. Not because you're carrying my child, but because you're you. Because you make me want to be better. Because when I imagine the rest of my life, you're in every single moment. Elena started, then stopped. The words were there, pressing against her lips, but she wasn't quite ready to say them. Ask me again in a few weeks, after Sophia is born, after the paternity test, after you've had more time to prove this is real. I'll ask you every day if that's what it takes, Damien promised. He pressed one more kiss to her forehead, then stepped back. Get some rest. I'll call you tomorrow. After he left, Elena stood with her hand on her belly, feeling Sophia's strong kicks, thinking about the impossible man who was trying to become possible for them. Your daddy loves us, she told Sophia. I think he really, truly loves us. And maybe, just maybe, that's going to be enough. The following weeks brought a new rhythm to Elena's life. Damien called every morning before she left for work, texted throughout the day, and came over most evenings to help with whatever needed doing. He painted the nursery a soft cream color to complement the yellow dresser, assembled a changing table, hung curtains, and read parenting books with the same intense focus he'd once brought to criminal operations. They went on real dates, to movies and museums, and once to a cooking class where Damien proved surprisingly adept at making pasta from scratch. He introduced Elena to his legitimate business associates as his partner, the mother of his child, speaking of her with such obvious pride that Elena felt herself blushing. But the real test came 3 weeks before Elena's due date, when she got a call at 2 in the morning. Damien's voice was strained, urgent. "I need you to do something for me, and I need you to trust me completely." Elena sat up, instantly alert, fear spiking through her chest. "What's wrong?" "There's a witness in a federal case against some of my former associates. They're trying to use my old connections to force me to give up information about the witness's location." Damien's words came fast, clipped. "I don't have that information, but they don't believe me. They're threatening to come after you if I don't cooperate." "What do we do?" Elena's hand went to her belly protectively. "Nothing." Damien's voice was firm. "We do nothing. I've already contacted the FBI. I'm giving them everything I know about my former operations, cooperating fully with their investigation. By morning, the people threatening you will be in federal custody." Elena processed this. "You're turning evidence against your own people." "Against criminals who threaten my family," Damien corrected. "And Elena, this is important. This might mean I have to testify, publicly. It will expose everything about my past, everything I've done. Are you prepared for that?" "Are you?" Elena countered. "I am, if it means keeping you and Sophia safe." There was no hesitation in his voice. "I told you I was walking away from that life. This is part of it, facing the consequences, making things right where I can." "Then do what you need to do," Elena said. "We'll handle whatever comes." "I love you," Damien said, and this time Elena didn't hesitate. "I love you too. Come home safe." By morning, the news was reporting federal raids across the city, dozens of arrests in what was being called one of the largest organized crime operations in years. Damien's name appeared in several articles, listed as a cooperating witness who had provided crucial information. Elena watched the coverage with her heart in her throat, understanding fully now what Damien had given up for them. Not just his empire, but his reputation, his connections, his safety. He'd burned every bridge to keep them protected. When he showed up at her apartment that evening, exhausted but whole, Elena pulled him into her arms and held on tight. "It's done," he said into her hair. "Really done. The old life, the criminal operations, all of it. I'm free." "We're free," Elena corrected and kissed him like she meant it. That night, for the first time since he'd destroyed her trust, Elena let Damien stay. Not out of fear or necessity, but because she wanted him there, wanted to fall asleep in his arms and wake up beside him. They lay together in her bed, his hand on her belly, Sophia kicking enthusiastically between them. "She approves," Damien murmured with a smile. "She has good taste," Elena teased. Then more seriously, "Are you sure about all of this? Testifying, cooperating with the feds, exposing yourself?" "I've never been more sure of anything." Damien's arms tightened around her. "Elena, I spent years building power through fear and violence. Now I get to build something real through love and honesty. That's not a sacrifice. That's a gift." Elena turned in his arms to face him, searching his eyes for any hint of regret or doubt. She found only certainty, only love, only determination to be the man she and Sophia deserved. "Then let's build it together," she said. "A real future, a real family." "Together," Damien agreed, and sealed the promise with a kiss. 3 weeks later, Elena woke to a sensation that felt distinctly different from Sophia's usual morning acrobatics. A dull ache spread across her lower back, radiating forward in waves that made her catch her breath. She lay still for a moment, trying to assess whether this was real labor or another false alarm like the one that had sent them rushing to the hospital 2 days ago. Damien stirred beside her, immediately alert despite the early hour. Over the past few weeks, he'd developed an almost supernatural ability to sense when something was wrong. "Contractions?" he asked, already reaching for his phone to start timing. "Maybe." Elena breathed through another wave. "They're different this time, more intense." "How far apart?" "I don't know. This is only the second one I've noticed." She glanced at the clock. 5:30 in the morning. "Let's wait a bit before we panic." But Damien was already up, moving with controlled efficiency as he gathered the hospital bag they'd packed and repacked a dozen times. Elena watched him with a mixture of amusement and affection, This man who'd once commanded criminal operations now utterly focused on making sure they had enough diapers and receiving blankets. The contractions continued, growing steadily closer together. By 7 o'clock, they were coming every 8 minutes, and Elena could no longer pretend this wasn't the real thing. "We should go," Damien said, his voice tight with barely controlled anxiety. "The hospital is 20 minutes away, and if traffic—" "Damien," Elena caught his hand. "Breathe. First babies take time. We're not going to have her in the car." "You don't know that." But he forced himself to take a deep breath, visibly trying to calm down. Okay. Do you need anything? Water? Food? Should you eat? I don't remember if you're supposed to eat." "I love you," Elena said, and watched some of the panic drain from his face. "And I need you to trust that I know my body. We have time." They arrived at St. Catherine's Hospital just after 8, and Elena was immediately swept into the comfortable familiarity of the labor and delivery ward. The nurses greeted her warmly. Several of them were colleagues from the pediatric unit, and got her settled into a private room with practiced efficiency. Dr. Morrison appeared within the hour, her calm presence immediately soothing. She examined Elena and pronounced her 4 centimeters dilated, progressing normally. "First babies usually take their time," she said with a kind smile. "Get comfortable. This could be a while." The hours that followed blurred together in a haze of mounting intensity. Damien stayed at Elena's side through all of it, holding her hand through contractions, helping her walk the halls when movement seemed to help, wiping her forehead with cool cloths when the pain made her feel feverish and overwhelmed. He was nothing like Elena had imagined he'd be in this moment. She'd worried he might try to take control, might bark orders at the medical staff or pace anxiously in the corner. Instead, he was perfectly present, anticipating her needs before she voiced them, offering quiet encouragement without being overbearing. "You're amazing," he murmured during one particularly brutal contraction. "So strong. Sophia is so lucky to have you as her mother." "Ask me again when this is over," Elena gasped, but she squeezed his hand gratefully. By early afternoon, Elena was 7 centimeters dilated and beginning to doubt her decision to try for an unmedicated birth. The pain was overwhelming, consuming, making it hard to think about anything except getting through the next contraction. "I want the epidural," she told Dr. Morrison. "I know I said I'd try without, but I can't." "You absolutely can have the epidural," Dr. Morrison said firmly. "This is your choice, Elena. There's no prize for suffering." "She's not suffering. She's incredible," Damien interjected, then seemed to catch himself. "But yes, if you want the epidural, you should have it. Whatever makes you most comfortable." Elena looked at him, this man who was learning to support her choices rather than make decisions for her, and felt a surge of love so intense it rivaled the contractions. "Get the anesthesiologist," she told Dr. Morrison. "I want to actually enjoy meeting my daughter instead of being too exhausted to appreciate it." The epidural was a revelation. Within 20 minutes, the overwhelming pain had dulled to manageable pressure, and Elena could finally think clearly again. She dozed between contractions while Damien sat in the chair beside her bed, watching her with an expression of such tender concern that it made her chest ache. "You should rest too," she told him. "It could still be hours." "I'm not tired." But the dark circles under his eyes told a different story. "I don't want to miss anything." "Damien." Elena held out her hand, and he took it immediately. "Come here." He settled carefully on the edge of the bed, and Elena guided his hand to her belly, where Sophia was still moving despite the labor. "She's still dancing," Damien marveled. "She's excited to meet her daddy." Elena's words were slightly slurred with exhaustion, but sincere. The daddy who gave up everything to keep us safe. The daddy who learned to choose love over power. "I didn't give up anything," Damien said quietly. "I gained everything that matters." Elena drifted in and out of sleep as the afternoon wore on, vaguely aware of nurses checking her progress, of Damien's constant presence, of the steady beeping of monitors tracking Sophia's heartbeat. When Dr. Morrison announced she was fully dilated and ready to push, Elena felt a jolt of adrenaline cut through the exhaustion. "This is it," Damien breathed, his hand tightening around hers. "Are you ready?" "No," Elena admitted, "but let's do it anyway." Pushing was harder than anything Elena had ever done. Even with the epidural, the pressure was intense, overwhelming, and her body felt like it was being torn apart. But every time she wanted to give up, every time the exhaustion threatened to pull her under, she looked at Damien and found the strength to keep going. He was crying openly, not bothering to hide the tears streaming down his face as he whispered encouragement. "You've got this. You're doing so well. Just a little more." "I can see her, Elena. I can see her head. She has dark hair, just like yours." "One more big push," Dr. Morrison encouraged. "Give me everything you've got, Elena." Elena bore down with every ounce of strength she had left, and suddenly there was a release, a rush, and then the most beautiful sound she'd ever heard, her daughter's first cry, loud and indignant and absolutely perfect. "She's here," Dr. Morrison announced, lifting a tiny, squirming bundle. "Congratulations, you have a beautiful baby girl." They placed Sophia on Elena's chest, and the world contracted to just this moment. The weight of her daughter in her arms, the feel of impossibly soft skin, the sound of those lusty cries that proved she was healthy and strong. Sophia was perfect, with a cap of dark hair and eyes that would probably turn brown like Damien's, tiny fingers that immediately wrapped around Elena's thumb with surprising strength. "Hi, baby girl," Elena whispered through her tears. "Hi, Sophia. We've been waiting so long to meet you." Damien stood beside the bed, his hand on Elena's shoulder, staring at their daughter with such naked wonder that Elena's heart cracked open even wider. He was shaking, tears coursing unchecked down his face, completely undone by the sight of the tiny person they'd created. "Can I—" His voice broke. "Can I hold her?" "Of course." Elena shifted, and the nurse helped transfer Sophia to Damien's arms. He cradled their daughter with infinite tenderness, his large hands so careful with her tiny body, and Elena watched something fundamental shift in his expression. This was the moment, she realized. The moment when Damien Vale ceased to be a crime boss, a businessman, or anything else he'd been before. Now holding his newborn daughter, he became simply a father, awed, terrified, and completely in love. "Hello, Sophia," he whispered. "I'm your daddy, and I promise you, I promise, I will spend every day of the rest of my life making sure you know how loved you are, how wanted, how absolutely perfect." Sophia's cries quieted at the sound of his voice, her tiny face turning toward him as if she recognized the voice she'd been hearing from inside the womb. Damien made a sound that was half laugh, half sob, and pressed the gentlest kiss to her forehead. "She knows you," Elena said softly. "She's been listening to you talk to her for months. I can't believe she's real." Damien looked at Elena with wonder. "We made her. We made this perfect person." The next few hours passed in a blur of activity. The nurses cleaning Sophia, weighing her, completing all the necessary medical checks. 7 pounds, 4 ounces, 20 inches long, perfect APGAR scores. A healthy, beautiful baby girl who had her mother's chin and her father's eyes and lungs that worked exceptionally well, if her periodic crying was any indication. By the time they were settled in the recovery room, evening had fallen outside the windows. Sophia slept in Elena's arms, content after her first nursing session, while Damien sat in the chair beside the bed, unable to stop staring at both of them. "I need to tell you something," he said quietly. Elena looked up, some old fear making her tense despite the perfect bubble of the moment. "What?" "The paternity test. I don't want it anymore." At her confused expression, he continued quickly. "I mean, we can do it if you want, for legal purposes or whatever. But Elena, I don't need a test to tell me she's mine. I knew it the moment I saw her. She's ours. That's all that matters." "The test is already ordered," Elena said. "Standard procedure since we're not married." "But Damien, you're right. She's yours. She's always been yours." "I want to marry you." The words dropped into the quiet room like stones into still water. Elena's breath caught, and she looked at Damien with wide eyes. "Don't answer now," he said quickly, standing and moving closer to the bed. "I know the timing is terrible. You just gave birth. You're exhausted. This isn't romantic. But Elena, holding our daughter, seeing you bring her into this world, I've never been more certain of anything. I want to marry you. I want to wake up beside you every morning and come home to you every night. I want to be a family legally and completely." "Damien, I'm not the man you met 2 years ago," he continued. "I'm not even the man who destroyed your trust 3 months ago. That man was a coward. who didn't know how to choose love over fear. But this man, the one standing here now, his voice cracked. This man knows that you and Sophia are the only things that matter. Everything else is just details. Elena looked down at Sophia sleeping peacefully in her arms, then back at Damien. Ask me again in 6 weeks, when I'm not high on hormones and exhausted from labor. Ask me when life is normal and messy, and we've had our first fight about whose turn it is to change diapers at 3 in the morning. I'll change all the diapers, Damien said immediately. Ask me in 6 weeks, Elena repeated, but she was smiling. And Damien, the answer is probably going to be yes. His face transformed, joy and relief and love combining into an expression Elena knew she'd remember for the rest of her life. He bent down and kissed her gently, carefully, mindful of Sophia between them. 6 weeks, he agreed. I can wait 6 weeks. The following days in the hospital passed in a haze of feeding schedules, diaper changes, and the overwhelming reality of being responsible for a tiny human. Damien rarely left except to shower and change clothes, learning to swaddle and burp and soothe with the same focused intensity he brought to everything. The paternity test was performed on their second day, a simple cheek swab that would take a few days to process. But as Damien had said, neither of them really needed it. Sophia was undeniably his, from her dark eyes to the way she calmed immediately when he held her. On their third day, Dr. Morrison came in with the discharge papers and a warm smile. You're doing wonderfully, both of you. Sophia is healthy and thriving. Any questions before I send you home? Just one, Damien said. How soon before we can have another baby? Elena threw a pillow at him, and Dr. Morrison laughed. Let's get through the next 6 weeks before we worry about that. Bringing Sophia home was both terrifying and perfect. Elena's apartment, which had seemed adequate when it was just her, now felt impossibly small with a bassinet and changing table and all the paraphernalia that came with a newborn. But it was home, filled with love and hope and the sound of Sophia's sweet cries. Damien stayed the first week, sleeping on the couch so Elena could have the bed, but available immediately whenever Sophia needed something. He changed diapers at 2 in the morning without complaint, walked Sophia around the apartment when she was fussy, and made sure Elena ate and rested even when she insisted she was fine. You're going to spoil me, Elena told him one night, watching him rock Sophia back to sleep after a feeding. That's the plan. He looked up from their daughter, and the tenderness in his eyes made Elena's chest tight. Take care of both my girls until they know, without question, that they're the center of my world. The paternity test results arrived 5 days after they brought Sophia home. Elena opened the envelope with shaking hands, even though she already knew what it would say. Probability of paternity, 99.9999%. Damien Vale was Sophia's biological father. We should celebrate, Damien said when she showed him the results. Make it official. Let me take you both out to dinner. Sophia is 5 days old, Elena laughed. I don't think she's ready for restaurants yet. Then I'll bring dinner here. He was already pulling out his phone. Something special. And Elena, I'm putting my name on her birth certificate, making it legal and permanent. Good. Elena handed him Sophia, watching his face light up as he cradled their daughter. She deserves to have you as her father, officially and forever. The weeks that followed established a rhythm that felt both chaotic and natural. Elena was on maternity leave, which gave her time to heal and bond with Sophia, while Damien divided his time between his legitimate business operations and helping with the baby. He'd insisted on hiring a night nurse twice a week so Elena could sleep, and though she'd initially resisted, she'd quickly learned to appreciate the luxury of uninterrupted rest. Sophia was an easy baby, all things considered. She ate well, slept in reasonable stretches, and had a disposition that was more curious than fussy. Elena caught Damien just staring at her sometimes, watching their daughter with such profound love that it made Elena's eyes sting with happy tears. 6 weeks arrived faster than Elena expected, and slower than Damien probably wanted. She'd recovered well from the birth, her body settling into a new normal, and Sophia had gained weight beautifully and was already tracking faces with those alert dark eyes. On the morning of Sophia's 6-week birthday, Elena woke to find Damien in the kitchen making breakfast with Sophia strapped to his chest in a baby carrier. The sight was so domestic, so far removed from the dangerous man she'd first known that Elena had to pause in the doorway just to take it in. "Good morning," Damien said, noticing her. "I made pancakes. And before you ask, yes, I checked 3 times that Sophia was secure in this thing." "You're a natural." Elena crossed the room to kiss first Sophia's downy head, then Damien's lips. "Though I'm not sure pancakes are an appropriate breakfast for a 6-week-old. These are for you." He plated the pancakes with a flourish. Sophia already ate and burped and had a diaper change. "We've been very productive this morning." They ate together, Sophia dozing contentedly against Damien's chest, the morning sun streaming through the windows. It was perfectly ordinary and absolutely extraordinary, this life they'd built together. After breakfast, Damien insisted on doing the dishes while Elena took a shower, a small luxury she still appreciated after weeks of abbreviated hygiene routines. When she emerged, wrapped in a robe with her hair still damp, she found Damien in the living room with Sophia on a blanket surrounded by scattered papers. "What's all this?" Elena asked, settling beside them. "Business plans for the real estate development company I'm launching. Completely legitimate, fully transparent." He gestured to the documents. "I wanted to show you before I move forward. Make sure you're comfortable with everything." Elena scanned the papers, impressed by the thoroughness. "This looks solid. And you're really doing this? Building something from the ground up legally?" "I am." Damien reached for her hand. "And Elena, I want your name on the paperwork too, as a partner. Equal stake, equal say in all decisions." "Damien, I don't know anything about real estate development." "But you know about people, about integrity, about doing the right thing." His thumb traced circles on her palm. "I need that perspective. I need you to keep me honest, keep me focused on building something we can both be proud of." "Then, yes." Elena squeezed his hand. "I'll be your partner in business and in life." Damien's eyes lit up. "Does that mean—" "It's been 6 weeks," Elena said softly, "and you haven't given me any reason to say no. So yes, Damien, if you still want to ask—" He was off the couch before she finished speaking, moving with more speed than grace as he fumbled in his pocket. The ring box was simple, elegant, and when he opened it to reveal a stunning diamond set in platinum, Elena's breath caught. "Elena Hart." Damien knelt beside the blanket where Sophia was waving her tiny fists. "You are the strongest, kindest, most incredible woman I've ever known. You've given me a daughter, a second chance, and a reason to be better than I ever thought possible. Will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life proving that I'm worthy of your love?" "Yes." The word came easily, certainly. "Yes, Damien, I'll marry you." He slid the ring onto her finger with shaking hands, then pulled her into a kiss that tasted like tears and joy and promises finally fulfilled. Sophia made a gurgling sound between them, and they broke apart laughing. "I think she approves," Elena said, looking down at their daughter. "She has excellent taste." Damien scooped Sophia up, holding her carefully. "Did you hear that, little one? Your mama said yes. We're going to be a real family." The wedding, when it happened 2 months later, was nothing like the elaborate affair Damien probably could have arranged. Instead, they married in a small ceremony at the courthouse with only a handful of close friends present. Elena wore a simple cream dress, Sophia wore a white onesie with a tiny bow tie, and Damien wore a suit but no tie, looking more relaxed than Elena had ever seen him. The judge who performed the ceremony was kind-faced and warm, speaking about partnership and commitment and the family they were building together. When it came time for the vows, Damien held Sophia in one arm and took Elena's hand with the other. "I, Damien Vale, take you, Elena Hart, to be my wife," he said, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. "I promise to choose you every day, to honor your strength, to support your dreams, and to be the partner and father you both deserve. I promise to build our future on honesty, trust, and love, and to never give you reason to doubt my commitment to this family." Elena's own vows were simpler, but no less meaningful. "I, Elena Hart, take you, Damien Vale, to be my husband. I promise to stand beside you as an equal partner, to help you be the best version of yourself, and to build a life filled with love and integrity. I promise to forgive your mistakes as you forgive mine, and to always choose our family first." When the judge pronounced them married, Damien kissed Elena with Sophia nestled safely between them, and Elena felt something click into place, a sense of rightness, of completeness that she'd been searching for without knowing it. The months that followed brought the normal chaos of life with an infant. Sleepless nights and explosive diapers, first smiles and rolling over, the constant wonder of watching Sophia grow and change. Damien threw himself into fatherhood with the same intensity he'd once brought to building his empire, researching developmental milestones and baby-proofing the apartment with almost comical thoroughness. They moved to a larger place when Sophia was 4 months old, a spacious townhouse in a good neighborhood with a yard for her to play in someday. Damien's legitimate business ventures were thriving, and Elena had returned to work part-time at the hospital, finding joy in the balance between her career and her family. The federal case against Damien's former associates went to trial when Sophia was 6 months old. Damien testified for 3 days, laying bare the details of his old life with unflinching honesty. It was difficult, watching the man she loved recount the violence and illegality he'd once accepted as normal. But it was also cathartic, a final severing of ties to a past that no longer defined him. The convictions that followed sent several major crime figures to prison for decades. Damien received immunity for his cooperation, and while some in his old world saw it as betrayal, Elena saw it as courage. The courage to face consequences, to choose justice over loyalty to a corrupt system. They were sitting in their living room on the evening after the trial concluded, Sophia playing on a blanket between them, when Damien finally spoke about it. "Do you regret it?" he asked. "Being with someone who has my history, who had to testify about all those terrible things." Elena looked at him. This man who'd destroyed her trust and rebuilt it brick by brick, who'd chosen love over power, who was currently making ridiculous faces to make their daughter giggle. "I regret the time we lost," she said honestly. "The 3 months when we could have been building this life together instead of being apart. But do I regret being with you now? Never. Because the man you were isn't the man you are. And the man you are is exactly who I want raising our daughter." "I want to have another baby," Damien said it suddenly, looking almost embarrassed. "I know Sophia's only 6 months old, and we should probably wait. But I keep thinking about giving her a sibling, about doing this whole thing again, the right way from the beginning." "The right way?" Elena repeated, amused. "Without the betrayal and the safe houses and the federal investigations." He grinned. "Just a normal pregnancy where I get to be excited from day one instead of terrified and defensive." "Ask me again when Sophia sleeps through the night," Elena teased, but she was smiling. "And Damien? I want that too. Another baby. A house full of children who never have to worry about their father's past because he chose a different future." Sophia chose that moment to let out a delighted shriek, rolling onto her stomach and pushing up on her arms. Damien swooped in immediately, praising her newfound skill with an enthusiasm that made Elena laugh. This was their life now. Simple moments filled with profound love, ordinary days that felt extraordinary because they'd fought so hard to have them. And as Elena watched her husband play with their daughter, she knew that every struggle, every moment of pain and fear and doubt had been worth it to arrive at this moment of perfect, impossible joy. The future stretched before them, uncertain but bright. There would be challenges, certainly. The normal difficulties of marriage and parenting, the occasional shadow from Damien's past, the everyday struggles that came with building a life together. But they would face it all as partners, as equals, as a family built on the foundation of second chances and love that had survived everything thrown against it. Sophia grabbed Damien's finger and pulled it to her mouth, gumming it with her 2 tiny teeth. He looked at Elena with such pure happiness that her chest ached with the beauty of it. "We did good," he said softly. "Didn't we?" "We did perfect," Elena corrected, reaching out to take his free hand. "We did exactly what we were meant to do." And in that moment, with their daughter between them and their whole future ahead, Elena knew it was true. They'd taken the broken pieces of their story, the betrayal and the fear, the anger and the pain, and transformed them into something whole and beautiful and worth every tear shed along the way. This was their happy ending. But more than that, it was their beginning, the start of a life built on truth, redemption, and the kind of love that chose to show up every single day, no matter how difficult the journey had been to get there. Damien leaned over Sophia to kiss Elena, soft and sweet and full of promise. I love you, he whispered. Thank you for giving me this, for giving me us. I love you too, Elena said, and meant it with every fiber of her being, now and always. Sophia babbled happily between them, reaching for both her parents with chubby hands, and the sound of her laughter filled the room like music, the perfect soundtrack to their imperfect, beautiful, hard-won life together.